The irony of life is that some of the biggest pains we cannot fathom until they creep into our lives, and in my case, it was the lingering ache of loss that caught me off guard. I'm Jake, a 30-year-old barista with dreams painted in frothy lattes and the hum of the coffee grinder. My world neatly revolved around the rhythmic pattern of brewing that I found solace in, especially with the steady pulse of regulars walking through the door every morning. They were more than customers to me, they were friends, and among them was Sarah. Sarah had been my best friend since middle school, the one who understood the nuances of my quirky sense of humor and occasionally would join me for a late-night gelato binge when I was lost in my thoughts. However, in the world of adulthood, where responsibilities shift like sand, I began to perceive a tension that hung like fog over our friendship. While I took pride in my simple life, Sarah was ambitious, climbing the corporate ladder with an agility I both admired and envied. It was a clash of worlds. She applied for jobs in bustling cities while I remained rooted in our sleepy town. And then, she got the job, an incredible offer in New York City that felt like a tornado sweeping me off my feet, leaving behind the comfort of our routine. On her last night in town, we met up at our favorite spot, a cozy little cafe resembling a time capsule from our childhood, its walls adorned with photos and art from local artists. I remember the way her smile flickered. Behind her bright eyes loomed that unspoken worry: how would we keep our connection intact once distance intervened? I was encouraged to celebrate her success, but deep down, the thought of losing my anchor began to gnaw at me. Hours turned into laughter, and we vowed to video chat and text often, but as we each hugged goodbye, I felt an unexpected wedge forming between us, one I couldn't pin down until it was too late. In those first few weeks after she left, I convinced myself I would be fine. I threw myself into work, entrenched in the comfort of espresso machines and friendly faces, but I slowly realized no amount of caffeine could fill the void Sarah left behind. The moments we once shared were replaced by empty evenings spent scrolling through pictures of her city exploits, and I grew bitter with jealousy over her seemingly perfect new life. I watched her flourish on social media, her photos lit up by the city skyline while I stayed put in our town, feeling like a spectator in my own life. The pain was nebulous at first, an undercurrent I dismissed as normal. Only later did I recognize the sharpness, a grief for a friendship that once felt so secure. Our texts fizzled, and each unanswered message carved another notch into my chest. It was not until months later, after several failed attempts to push through the silence, that she finally reached out, her voice vibrating through the phone. Sarah sounded different, the excitement of the city contrasting with my stagnant reality. It took a devastating moment, the death of her father, which compromised her world further for her to truly realize the depth of our friendship. When she needed me most, I felt totally absent, engulfed in my own cocoon of selfishness while she grieved a loss I would never understand until that call rang in. The vulnerability in her voice shattered the walls I had unconsciously fortified. I booked a flight the very next day, my heart racing with indecision but driven by an urgent instinct to be there for her. Standing in her tiny New York apartment, the scent of cinnamon and candles replaced the coffee from home. Everything felt surreal. As she opened the door, we simply fell into each other's arms, tears tracing the lines of laughter and love that had once defined us. We ate takeout on the floor while I listened to stories of her father, each word another brick in a wall we began rebuilding together. In those moments, I realized how easily we underestimate the weight of missing someone until time digests the unspoken emotions. My visit wasn't just about comfort, it was an awakening, a realization that friendships are not exempt from the complex quilt of life, and sometimes, love comes in the form of understanding when to reach out or just be present. After spending a few days by her side, I left forgiven and healing, promising to never lose that connection again. The distance faded into something manageable, something we both learned to navigate like drifting clouds. And as I reflect on it now, I recognize a bittersweet irony. The pain of separation, beneath its sharp surface, unveiled a deeper appreciation for the ties that bind. Update: I'm happy to share that Sarah and I have managed to keep our friendship vibrant, despite the miles. We take turns visiting each other, sometimes even meeting in cities halfway between our homes. What started as a painful lesson has transformed into a beautiful journey of rediscovery, showing us that true connections can weather any storm, even the storms we create ourselves. But even as I share this happiness, there's a part of me that still carries the weight of our past, a reminder that relationships can be fragile, beautiful things, often mistaken for certainty when really, they are always in motion. There are days when I catch myself scrolling through old photos of us, laughing at our silly faces, or cringing at yet another selfie taken during our random road trips, arms thrown around each other in a tight squeeze as if we were trying to compress time itself. Each image is a timestamp, encapsulating moments that were once vibrant and alive but now exist only in memory. For a while after the move, I dwelled in that space, the hollow echo of her laughter fading against the walls of my apartment, which felt too large, too silent. I remember calling her one evening, the kind of twilight that draped the sky in soft pinks and deep blues. I wanted to confide my loneliness, but instead we found ourselves recapping our days. She had started a job in a quaint bookstore, replacing her old retail gig, and I had finally finished the first draft of my novel after months of feeling like I was chasing shadows. Those conversations became a lifeline for both of us, threads pulling us through the haze of change. At the same time, I began to realize that the pain of separation was not only about missing her presence, it was about confronting the ghosts of unspoken words and things left unsaid. During one of our late-night calls, Sarah mentioned something that struck me like a rogue wave crashing into the shore. She was talking about how people underestimate the pain of being alone, mistaking it for mere solitude, a simple trait of independence. "It's different when it's chosen," she said, the fragility of her tone allowing me to sense the weight behind her words. "But when it's forced upon you, it feels like a wound that's deep but never really injures the skin." I sat in silence as her words echoed in my mind, tracing a path through my heart. I never fully grasped that distinction until now. It brought clarity to my own struggle, one that became a constant companion in my new life. I started jotting down my thoughts in a journal, letting the ink spill onto the pages whenever the silence became too loud, remembering not only the bright memories of us together but also the weight of distance between. I began to attend a small writer's retreat in a nearby town, hoping to find fresh inspiration and maybe meet some new people. To my surprise, I found others sharing similar feelings in the hum of long storytelling nights, tapestry outreach sessions where vulnerability felt like an open invitation rather than a burden. It didn't take long for me to bond with a small but diverse group, a mix of aspiring poets, established novelists, and sensitive souls who, like me, were navigating their own shifting landscapes. They weren't replacements for Sarah, rather, they became companions on this unexpected journey. One of them, Liam, an insightful guy with an old soul, often encouraged me to embrace the ache of separation as an artistic tool instead of a hindrance. He said, "When you feel that gnawing emptiness, let it fill you with understanding. It's a part of you now." Leaving the retreat, I felt renewed, equipped with fresh perspectives that were like soft breezes on my once static life. And while there were still moments that I longed for Sarah's familiar laugh or the warmth of her encouraging words, I resolved to balance my newfound friendships with the enduring connection I had with her. Weeks turned into months, and although we still shared stories from our separate corners of the world, I found I no longer mourned her absence. I began to celebrate our odd little friendship, one that had evolved beyond proximity. With time, I understood that distance does not diminish the depth of love. Instead, it can broaden its horizon, allowing us to redefine what companionship means. As I sit on my porch, my journal upon my lap as the sun begins its descent, I sense a peace unfurling deep within me, a softened acceptance of life's unpredictability. It is a fluctuating tapestry, after all, woven with threads of laughter and threads of sadness, both necessary to create something uniquely beautiful. Life is a trickster in that way, and sometimes, the very separation we dread can lead to profound realignment, nurturing the roots of connection in surprising ways. As the last rays of sunlight danced upon the horizon, I couldn't help but think back on the moments that led me to this serene state of mind. There was a time when the mere thought of being apart from those I loved sent a chill down my spine. The fear of losing connection was like a storm cloud looming over my heart. But now, looking at the pink and orange hues merging in the sky, I realized the storms were often mere prefaces to breathtaking rainbows, stretching wide and full with forgotten promises of hope. Too often, I underestimated the pain that came with distance, how it could gnaw at the edges of happiness, causing protagonists of love stories to meander into unknown terrains, struggling with solitude. I remember a chilly autumn afternoon, not long after separating from Sarah, where I found myself in the small cafe we used to frequent, surrounded by the scent of roasted coffee beans and baked goods. Alone in a corner, I watched as couples shared laughter and sipped steaming mugs, the warmth of connection starkly contrasted against my own cold solitude. I didn't realize it at the time, but witnessing those interactions was an unexpected kaleidoscope of emotions, longing, nostalgia, envy, but also a quiet sense of hope that perhaps my heart might one day open itself to new connections, even with the old thread still tightly woven in. With my journal perched before me, I began writing about my feelings, the catharsis pouring onto the pages as ink, revealing shades of grief and acceptance I didn't know existed. After a while, I took a deep breath and longed for that familiar warmth, Sarah's laughter, our shared jokes, the comfort of simply being ourselves amidst the world's chaos. It was within those pages that I promised to nurture our friendship through whatever channels life had left open. It became my silent rebellion against the easily frayed ties we often allowed to unravel. I started sending her little letters, almost anachronistic in this age of quick texts, but filled with heart and warmth. I shared pieces of my life, tidbits of new experiences, silly mishaps, and even quiet moments that whispered of nostalgia, each letter crafted like a gift wrapped in memories. Sarah responded with enthusiasm, her words spilling from the pen in vibrant colors, emboldened by the distance yet softened by our shared history. She would detail her own adventures, the days spent finding solace in new places, yet all the while capturing the essence of our shared times within her prose. Sipping chai lattes in a hip cafe in her city, she wrote about a lovely park where she would sit and watch the people go by, catching glimpses of couples and families, which often stirred her thoughts back to us. I could feel our connection rekindle through each carefully curated line, each memory fluttering like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze, finding their way back home. And now, as I pen my reflections on this porch under the dimming sky, I marvel at how the winds of separation cooled our relationships yet allowed the roots to grow stronger. The pain I once dreaded became a bridge, leading us toward renewed laughter and adventures that were yet to come. We rediscovered the beauty of simple moments during our visits, cooking together again, our shared silence tumbling in comfort rather than tension, hiking trails that stretched beyond the horizon, mirroring the way our friendship continued to expand. Sometimes I find myself pondering the intricacies of life, how it never stays confined to just one path, how it weaves through shadows and light seamlessly, creating a dynamic tapestry of friendship, love, and connection. I learned that letting go doesn't mean losing, it often means stepping back, observing, and appreciating the layers that can emerge when we give space for growth. As the last of the sun slips below the horizon, the stars begin to sprinkle the sky, a sigh of contentment escapes me, the journey of rediscovery continues, and there lies a promise of more laughter, more shared experiences, and the gentle reminder that love and connection can always find a way to bridge whatever distance life may introduce. And so, with my heart lightened, I close my journal, embrace the darkness that envelops my porch, and let the quiet reflection of this moment guide me softly toward sleep, cradled on wings of hope in the gentle rhythm of possibility. Confession: I had a miscarriage, and my teenage brother is becoming a dad. It feels surreal to even write that, but I've spent days wrestling with these thoughts in my head since the news broke. I'm 25, married to Jason for a few years now, and I've always imagined the laughter of children filling our cozy little home. When I got pregnant last summer, it felt like the stars aligned perfectly. We decorated a nursery, picked out baby names, and chattered for hours about our future. But then, life threw a cruel twist my way. My heart shattered in that sterile hospital room when the doctor told me there was no heartbeat. Grief swallowed me whole, leaving a hollow ache that tainted everything. It's a pain I still can't quite articulate, but it morphed into a numbing shadow that followed me relentlessly. Lately, I've been coming to terms with that profound loss, a heavy burden dressed in silence, when without warning, the ground shifted beneath my feet again. That's when I learned that my little brother, Dylan, had been keeping a secret. 18 years old and just as naive as any teenager, he was going to be a dad. I remember the moment vividly, how the words slammed into me like a train. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a bowl of my failed attempts at cookies sitting between us, and he blurted it out in the most nonchalant manner, as if casually discussing the weather. "I'm going to be a father," he said, and just like that, lunch became something else entirely. I felt a wave of resentment crash against the pain of my miscarriage, an ugly jealousy creeping in unexpectedly. The very thought of a teenager having a child while my dreams had crumbled felt like a slap in the face. Couldn't he see the cruel irony of it all? But inside, I wrestled with wanting to be happy for him, wanting to support him the way I should, knowing he was scared and confused too. Trying to be the understanding sister, I fought through my own devastation, putting on a brave face while my insides twisted in turmoil. As days turned to weeks, I found myself lingering on thoughts of Dylan's future child, knowing that whenever I'm around, I'll inevitably be reminded of what I can't have. I began to study him closely, watching the boy I grew up with morphing into someone that seemed more like a man, navigating parenthood with an unsettling mix of naivety and optimism. He was excited, constantly dreaming up plans and soaking in parenting advice from online forums like some eager college student studying for finals. During quiet moments, I wrestled with guilt. How could I envy him when I knew all he was feeling was sheer joy? I was torn between pride and this gnawing grief, the emotional conflict left me feeling utterly isolated. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and asked, "Are you okay? You seem distant." The sincerity in his voice almost broke me. It was a simple question, a probe into the emptiness I'd wrapped around myself, but his words hung in the air like an unwelcome reality. I realized then I needed to share my pain. I couldn't keep wallowing in sorrow while he brought new life into the world. So, I took a deep breath and opened up about my miscarriage, letting tears spill freely as I spoke of the heartbreak and emptiness that had settled in my heart. I explained how it felt like I was living in a world filled with what-ifs, and how Dylan's happiness felt like a constant reminder of my loss. He listened quietly, processing every word. The air was thick with understanding, and what surprised me was that I felt lighter afterwards. By sharing my grief, I allowed us both to find common ground, a sort of sibling connection that transcended our individual struggles. When the day finally came for him to become a father, I was there, standing in that hospital room filled with the scent of antiseptics and new life. Watching him hold his child for the first time ignited a bittersweet cocktail of emotions within me, joy mixed with sorrow, but I didn't shy away from it. Instead, I let the feelings wash over me, acknowledging my pain while celebrating his joy. I realized I could be happy for him while still grieving my loss. Those two feelings could coexist in a strange, beautiful contradiction. As I held that tiny, precious life in my arms, Dylan's son, I felt hope stir within me for the first time in months. Maybe, just maybe, this was a new beginning, a chance to carry on a different legacy of love, despite the wounds that life had dealt me. We sat in that hospital room for hours, sharing stories, laughter, and all the hopes we had for this child. At that moment, I knew that while life had taken so much away from me, it had gifted me with something else, a deeper love for my brother and an abiding hope for the future. Things will be different now. I may have moments of sadness, but they wouldn't drown me anymore. So maybe this is my confession. Loss can open a door to unexpected joy, and in embracing all parts of life, I finally found a way to heal. Update: it's been 6 months since Dylan's son was born, and honestly, it feels like a new chapter for us all. I've started volunteering at the local children's hospital, rediscovering the joy and laughter I thought I'd lost. Every time I see my brother with his son, I feel a bittersweet warmth fill my heart. I still have moments of sadness, but they're gradually shifting into something deeper, a commitment to support them both as they navigate this new adventure. Grief, I've learned, doesn't disappear. It whispers reminders of our past while urging us to fill our lives with love, creating legacies in unexpected ways. I'm grateful for the laughter, the late-night feedings I help with, and most importantly, the bond my brother and I have now forged through this journey together. Life continues to surprise me, and I'm learning to embrace it. As I sit in the living room, the soft glow of the evening light filtering through the sheer curtains, I can't help but reflect on how much has changed since that stormy day when I had my miscarriage. The sound of my brother's laughter, muffled from the kitchen where he's prepping a bottle, is like a balm to my heart, soothing the lingering aches. I had imagined this moment differently. I had dreamed of a family of my own, of swaddling my baby in cozy blankets and whispering sweet nothings while my brother looked on with a smile. Yet here he is, at 16, with a tiny human depending on him and, strangely enough, it feels right in an imperfect way. I thought I'd feel a twinge of jealousy each time I held his son, but instead, that same warmth envelops me again, a testament to the resilience of the heart. Every coo and gurgle from the crib ignites a sense of hope, a gentle push toward healing that I never anticipated. In these fragile moments, my brother and I have built an unspoken pact. We support each other through the sleepless nights, the endless diaper changes, and the moments of sweet tranquility spent just watching the baby drift into slumber. It's intoxicating, the way his face lights up when he talks to his son, his eyes softening as they connect through shared giggles and baby gurgles. It's a language of love that we've both learned to speak, translating our pain into something beautiful. That first time I held my niece, I felt like a part of something larger than my grief. I had been handed a new role, an opportunity to nurture not just this innocent life but also the shattered pieces of my own. Each day, as my brother and I sit together, we share stories from our childhoods, countless memories painted with laughter and mischief. His son, cradled in his arms, becomes the canvas upon which we weave our histories. Yet, there remains a delicate balance of sadness beneath the surface, intertwined with the joy. I find myself caught in a delicate dance, cherishing these moments while acknowledging the emptiness I still carry. I confide in my brother during our quieter evenings, sharing my fears about motherhood that will never come to fruition for me. "It's just not fair," I had said one night, the weight of my words hanging thick between us. But my brother looked at me, his expression solemn but understanding. Life isn't fair. But we can choose what we make of it. He smiled, rubbing the back of his neck like he always does when he's deep in thought. It was a reminder that even amid sorrow, we could carve space for joy, both for ourselves and for each other. Over the weeks, I've started to register the changed dynamics within our family. Our parents, initially overwhelmed by the unexpected news of my brother's impending fatherhood, have softened into their roles of adoring grandparents, frequently stopping by with meals and advice dripping with their affection. I've found it fascinating how joy can spread like wildfire, consuming the remnants of grief and weaving it into new patterns of family bonds. Some days, I catch glimpses of our old lives, my brother and I teasing each other about our teenage antics, which ignited laughter among ourselves. I sometimes wonder if these moments are reminders of the innocence we are desperately trying to capture amid this upheaval. These nights, where we dim the lights, wrap ourselves in the warmth of blankets, and indulge in nostalgic stories of our childhood, have morphed into something truly special. As the days pass, I often find myself reveling in the simple joys, the soft touch of the baby's tiny hand around my finger, the way his wide eyes explore the world with curiosity, and the way my brother beams every time he sees his son accomplish even the smallest of feats, like a smile or a coo. I discover an unexpected sense of purpose. I pour my heart into being an awesome aunt, a role I never anticipated, but one that brings me a profound satisfaction I could not have imagined before. With every milestone, first steps, first words, I'm reminded that love transcends loss. It builds bridges where once there were only shadows. Eventually, we decide to celebrate the baby's first birthday, a monumental occasion that feels like a tribute to life itself. Our parents throw a small gathering, and we adorn the backyard with colorful decorations and streamers that dance lazily in the summer breeze, while laughter intertwines with the buzzing of bees. As I observe my brother, who is now a doting father, I feel a swell of pride and gratitude wash over me. His joy is infectious, and for the first time in a long while, the ache of my loss doesn't feel as suffocating. Instead, it becomes a silent reminder of what once was, urging me to embrace the present, shifting the narrative from what I couldn't have to what is here, vibrant and alive. As I blow out the candles on the cake, I see the smiles and laughter around me, and my heart whispers a sweet promise to carry this love forward, blending our pasts with the future we never anticipated. It's still a journey, one filled with complexities and emotions that ebb and flow. I don't know what tomorrow holds or what other surprises life has hidden around the corner. But for now, I am here, tangled with my brother and his son in this wonderful web of life, feeling grateful for the laughter amidst the tears and finding healing in every moment shared. As the last remnants of laughter echoed around the room, I felt a gentle swell of peace settle over me, an elusive sensation that had often slipped through my fingers. My brother, still wide-eyed and youthful yet suddenly transformed in the way only parenthood can do to someone, cradled his son, a small bundle of innocence wrapped in soft fabric. Watching him was like peering into a mirror reflecting both the familiar and the unfamiliar. There was a hint of wonder in his eyes, a spark that whispered of responsibilities yet to be mastered and joys yet to be discovered. I could barely keep the smile off my face as he attempted to balance the baby with one arm while reaching for a slice of cake with the other, a comically heroic display. The noise slowly dissipated until only the quiet hum of the fluorescent kitchen lights remained, the joyous aftermath of birthday celebrations lingering like a soothing balm. I wandered outside, where the night wrapped around me, cool but comforting, a striking contrast to the warmth and chaos inside. I leaned against the wooden railing of our porch and surveyed the star-speckled sky, each shimmering point a silent witness to my journey, to all the heartache that had led to this moment. Grief, once a heavy cloak draped over my shoulders, had transformed into something lighter, a reminder woven into the fabric of my being, urging me to cherish every fleeting second. It was a surprising revelation, really, how the threads of joy and sorrow could so intricately intertwine, creating a tapestry rich with meaning. I thought about the birthday cake and how it represented not only my brother's new beginning but also my desire to celebrate life in all its forms. At that moment, I began to see my brother's son not just as the product of a young, unintended association but as a beacon of hope, a fresh start we all needed, a tiny but potent reminder that life goes on, filled with possibilities. When the kitchen door creaked open, I turned to find my brother stepping outside, wiping frosting from his fingers with an exaggerated roll of his eyes, an expression that perfectly encapsulated the delightful mayhem of parenthood. He slipped beside me, looking up at the stars, and we shared a comfortable silence, a moment devoid of expectation yet brimming with understanding. "You know," He finally said, his voice barely louder than a whisper, "I really didn't expect life to shift like this." To be honest, I was terrified when I found out. I nodded, feeling the familiar threads of his uncertainty tug at my heart. Yeah, I guess we both were. An ambient stillness enveloped us, and I could sense the weight of unspoken truths perched just beyond the veil of our vulnerability. "But it feels right now," he added, a cautious optimism shining through. "Like I'm meant to be here, doing this." We spoke softly, words of encouragement and reflection spilling out, creating bridges over our shared experience of grief and hope. It was a fleeting exchange that felt ceremonious in its own right, a pact of solidarity amidst the uncertainties of parenthood and the shadows of our past. We stood there, two siblings tethered by obligation and love, newfound allies in this uncharted territory, determined to navigate the unexpected turns together. As the night darkened further, and the stars twinkled with a knowing glimmer, something inside me unfurled. I realized this story wasn't solely about my brother or even the circumstances that brought his son into the world. It was also about the capacity we have to love fiercely, to grow through adversity, and to embrace the mosaic of memories that life unfurled before us. Mixing the bittersweet with the beautiful. There was still uncertainty ahead, of course. Parenthood is daunting, and my brother would stumble along the way, just as I would wrestle with my memories. But there was also strength in the narrative we were crafting, woven with resilience and laughter, intertwining our lives like the constellations above us. The night lingered on, filled with whispers of togetherness and the promise of tomorrow, giving me hope that while the road before us might be winding, we wouldn't journey alone. In this moment, encircled by family and love, I finally found rest in the understanding that healing is never linear. It spirals, it twists, yet ultimately leads us back to one another, eternally connected through the shared gift of life itself. There's a weight that lingers on my chest, a secret I've carried for far too long, and it all began on that warm summer day when we were kids, bouncing on the old trampoline in my backyard, laughter echoing like music in the air. My childhood friend, Mark, was more than just a companion. He was my partner in crime, the brother I never had, always up for an adventure, even if that often involved the kinds of mischief that led to scoldings from our parents. As we grew up, that bond only deepened, forged in deep conversations, shared dreams, and endless inside jokes. But life has a strange way of pulling people apart. College took Mark to a city far away, and while we stayed in touch, the distance began to change the nature of our relationship. Then came the day I had always longed for, the birth of my son, Ethan. In that moment, a fire ignited in me, an overwhelming urge to pay tribute to the person who had been a cornerstone in my childhood. After much contemplation, I decided to name my son after him, Ethan Mark, a name I believed would honor that friendship. It felt right, a quiet bond woven into the fabric of my being, yet as the months passed, a dread began to swell in the pit of my stomach. Mark had no idea. To him, I simply had a son, and I had neglected to share the truth behind his name, a truth so laced with love and affection that it became suffocating. Every text, every call, felt like a tightrope walk, and I found myself instinctively avoiding any conversation that could lead to the revelation. The guilt gnawed at me, almost as if naming my son after him was a betrayal by keeping it from him, a part of our shared history that I denied. The thought echoed in my mind, and with each passing day, I imagined how Mark would feel upon discovering the truth. Would he be honored, or would he think I was withholding that love? The indecision ate at me mercilessly. One evening, after tucking Ethan into bed, I found myself scrolling through our old photos on my phone, pictures of us laughing, getting muddy in our youth, clutching our ice cream cones like trophies. There it was, a haunting nostalgia that held both beauty and pain, and in that moment, I wondered if I had tarnished that bond I cherished so much. As days turned to weeks, I could feel the pressure build until it snapped one Sunday afternoon while Mark was visiting, sitting on my couch, laughing over tales from our school days as Ethan played in the background, blissfully unaware. When the laughter faded, I felt compelled to confess everything, to claim my vulnerability. "Mark, there is something I need to tell you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked apprehensive, those familiar brown eyes squinting with curiosity. I took a deep breath and shared my truth, the name, the reasons behind it, and the selfish fear that held me back. Silence enveloped the room. Time felt heavy as it ticked away, and for a moment, I thought I had ruined everything. Then Mark's smile slowly returned, and tears welled in his eyes as he took my hand. "You've carried this for so long, haven't you? It means the world to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Relief washed over me in waves, replacing the burden that was once there. In the aftermath of that revelation, we shared stories about what it meant to grow up together and how we would guide our sons into that same reckless joy we had known. I realized that sometimes, the scariest secrets can lead to the biggest breakthroughs, and as Mark hugged Ethan tightly, my heart swelled with comfort, knowing I had shared a piece of our history that would only serve to deepen our bond as friends. As I reflect on that day now, I can say it was a turning point, and while I may have delayed confronting my truth, the love I had for Mark and the silent understanding between us had transcended fear and hesitation. Update: it's been a few months since that day, and I can honestly say that my relationship with Mark has grown even stronger. He has embraced Ethan like a second son, creating new memories that are steeped in love and laughter. We have started a tradition of adventure weekends, where we take our sons to the places we used to explore, and each new adventure is, in its own way, an homage to our past friendship. I've learned that holding on to fear only creates distance, while sharing truth and vulnerability can build bridges. The best part? The other day, I overheard Mark telling Ethan about how special his name is, a legacy that they both now share, something I never realized would bring us even closer. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? Mark and I had found ourselves laughing over memories from our childhood, as we set up camp at the river where we used to fish under the setting sun. The sound of crickets filled the air, weaving an invisible tapestry of nostalgia around us. My heart swelled at the sight of our sons playing nearby, their laughter mingling seamlessly with the sounds of nature. They climbed trees as we had once done, completely lost in their own world of adventure. I couldn't help but marvel at the bond forming not just between our children but between Mark and me as well. Every story I shared with him was tinged with the bright hues of reminiscence, each tale deeper than the last, revealing pieces of my heart I had kept tucked away out of fear. The truth about Ethan's name still lingered in the air, a sweet secret that felt like a warm hug every time I caught a glimpse of Mark's easy smile. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, I took a moment to reflect on the path that had led me here, the countless moments that could have gone differently if fear had held the reins. It wasn't merely a river running alongside our camp, it felt symbolic of the bonds being forged right in front of me, flowing with potential and history all at once. So many years had passed since that fateful moment in high school, the day I knew my best friend was facing more hardships than I could understand, yet I had chosen to remain silent about the pain I felt, the loss of the friendship we once had. But tonight, with the gentle hum of nature all around, I sensed that I was ready to let go of my hesitation. I would tell him the truth about naming Ethan after him, that in the quiet moments of my son's life, I found pieces of Mark's spirit reflected back at me. It was more than just a name, it was a bridge spanning 2 generations, a reminder that love can withstand time, hurt, and misunderstandings. With the night wrapping around us like a cozy blanket, I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs, and resolved to reveal the heartfelt significance behind Ethan's name before the weekend was over. As I glanced over at Mark, my heart warmed with confidence. I was no longer afraid. That evening, as we sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows under the vast expanse of twinkling stars, I knew the sound of our children's laughter was just the beginning of a new legacy, one built on honesty and acceptance. The stillness surrounding us felt embraced by clarity, the very atmosphere nudged me forward. I marked the moment, relishing the flickering flames, the laughter, and the connection, reminding myself that what could be gained from this truth was far greater than any fear I had harbored. As I prepared to share that piece of my heart, something monumental shifted within me, the realization that having friendships rooted in vulnerability might be one of the truest forms of strength we could carry into the future. With my heart racing but my resolve firm, I waited for the right moment during our adventure weekend, a cozy bonfire under a star-studded sky. Mark was flipping burgers on the grill, the scent merging with the crisp evening air, when I saw the light of curiosity glinting in his eyes. I could feel the warmth of the fire reflecting the warmth of the moment, and it occurred to me that this was the perfect time to tell him. Our sons were wrapped in their own world, gabbing excitedly about their favorite stories and superheroes. I could hear Ethan's contagious laughter, and it pulled my attention back, reminding me of how quickly time had slipped by since Mark and I were kids ourselves, giggling over silly games and hidden treasures in the woods. I took a deep breath, gathering courage stirring within me, and I called Mark over, inviting him to join me at the edge of our gathering. He approached, holding 2 plates piled high with burgers and s'mores, a proud smile lighting his face. Ever feel like the past has a funny way of sticking around? I began, surprised at how easily the words flowed, even with the weight they carried. Mark raised an eyebrow, setting the plates down on the low wooden table as he leaned in closer, genuinely intrigued. "What's stirring in that head of yours?" I chuckled lightly, thankful that laughter had helped to diffuse the air. It's just. You remember those days we would dream about our futures? Sitting on that rickety old swing set? Mark's smile widened as nostalgia danced through his eyes, the flickers of the flames reflecting the warmth of those shared memories. How could I forget? We had it all figured out back then. Yeah, and we thought we'd name our future kids after each other, right? The jest hung in the air for a moment, a playful acknowledgement of our childhood innocence, but I wasn't quite ready to lead with humor. Actually, Mark, I need to tell you something. He tilted his head, curiosity morphing into something deeper, more sincere. What is it? The truth is, I named my son Ethan after you. Saying it out loud felt like exhaling after holding my breath for too long, the words hovering between us, heavy with years of unspoken sentiment. I wanted to honor that friendship we had, and you have meant so much to me, I admitted, scanning his face for reaction, watching as a mixture of surprise and admiration flickered across it. His gaze softened and then crinkled at the edges, his smile radiating warmth. Really? That's amazing, I had no idea, he said, seemingly touched. It was as if a secret barrier had shattered between us, bringing forth an unspoken bond that hadn't faded, merely waited for the right moment to reveal itself. My heart swelled, relief coursing through me. We spent a moment in silence, the night wrapping us in its comforting embrace as crickets chirped a soft symphony. I always felt this connection, Mark continued, and there was resonance in his voice that made me feel seen, understood. It was cathartic. To think we'd name our sons after each other, what a legacy, right? In that moment, it felt as if a tapestry of our lives had woven together in the most beautiful way. The laughter of our sons burst through our revelatory bubble, pulling us back into joyful reality, but I felt lighter, unburdened by secrets. The conversation flowed easily after that, as we shared what being fathers had taught us, how our relationships had evolved, and what it meant, beyond mere naming, to keep the spirit of our childhood dreams alive. As the night wore on and the fire dwindled, I realized that our friendship had transformed not just from nostalgia but from honesty and vulnerability, those seemingly simple acts now the very foundation of something enduring, something that would guide our children in their future adventures. As I exchanged stories with Mark, laughing at old memories, I understood that life doesn't always unfold in the straightforward paths we envision. Sometimes it dances around corners filled with uncertainty only to reveal deeper connections than we had dared to believe possible. When the evening finally came to a close, the embers warming our goodbyes, I held on to the moment, knowing that this is what sharing life truly meant. I went home that night feeling grateful, armed with a renewed understanding of friendship and family, and pondering how this legacy of authenticity would ripple through the years ahead. With Ethan asleep in his bed, and dreams whispering promises of adventure, I realized that the future was a blank canvas, and with every moment I shared, I could paint it with love and truth. And at the end of the day, isn't that the greatest adventure of all? Confession, I did something horrible when I was a kid, and I deeply regret it. It's a memory that has haunted me for years, nestled in the recesses of my mind like a dark secret I've never fully shared with anyone. I was just 10 years old, brimming with innocence and an endless well of curiosity, living in a suburb that seemed normal enough on the surface. The sun always seemed to shine brighter back then, illuminating the endless afternoons spent playing outside, running through sprinklers, and riding bikes with my friends. I was part of a close-knit group that spent every summer day together, biking down to the local ice cream parlor or exploring the patch of woods behind our houses. My best friend, Jake, was the ringleader, always coming up with wild ideas that sent us on new adventures. One day, we decided to build a treehouse, claiming the tallest oak in the park as our own. We couldn't have been more excited. It felt like we were creating our own little kingdom and a sanctuary from the unpredictability of kid life. As we gathered tools and planks, I remember the thrill coursing through me, the sense of freedom intertwined with the power of creation. But one afternoon, as we were hammering away and sharing laughs, a younger kid from the neighborhood wandered into our territory. His name was Tommy, a shy little boy who usually kept to himself, always trailing a few paces behind the rest of us. He was the kind of kid who blended into the background, the sort rarely acknowledged unless someone was feeling particularly generous. I could see the flicker of hope in his big brown eyes as he asked if he could join us, but something twisted inside of me. Instead of welcoming him, I felt an irrational surge of disdain. Maybe it was the jealousy of being the center of attention or a fleeting belief that he'd ruin our fun, but whatever it was, I didn't stop to question it. I laughed cruelly and said something awful, a comment about him being too small, too weak, too undesirable to join in. My friend snickered, and Tommy's expression shifted from hope to hurt in an instant. The laughter rang hollow, and a sickening weight settled in my stomach. But I brushed it off, too caught up in the group mentality and my own ego. Just a kid being a kid, right? As days passed, I noticed Tommy drifting further away from our circle, never quite looking me in the eye whenever we crossed paths at school or on the playground. I knew what I had done was wrong, but the longer I let it sit unacknowledged, the easier it became to pretend as if it hadn't happened. The guilt felt heavy, but my pride held it locked away. Summers faded into autumn, and soon, Jake and I found ourselves in high school, diverging down our respective paths. Life got busier, and I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut, convincing myself that I'd outgrown it. Years rolled by, and the memory of that moment occasionally flickered through my mind, always accompanied by a pang of regret. Then, one fateful evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Tommy. It was a picture of him standing beside the college acceptance letter I had never expected to see, a smiling, confident young man, brimming with potential. My heart sank as I realized how much he had grown, how far he had come despite what I had said to him. The guilt resurfaced like a tidal wave, crashing over the reservations I'd built up over the years. I couldn't let it go this time. I whipped out my phone, heart racing, and sent him a message, one filled with the sincerity I had neglected all those years ago. I told him how sorry I was, how much I regretted my cruel words. I hit send, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. When I received a response, it was measured and surprisingly kind. Tommy acknowledged my apology but added that he had long since forgiven me, though the wound had hurt at the time. He had learned to overcome the judgment of others and find strength in himself. Those words pierced me, they held an understanding that I didn't deserve. It marked the beginning of a tentative friendship. We started chatting occasionally, sharing bits of our lives with one another. I learned about his success in college, his passion for graphic design, his dreams to start a nonprofit for kids who felt lost and unwanted, like he had once. In return, I shared my own struggles, my wrong turns, and the lessons I had learned along the way. Each exchange helped to evaporate the distant sorrow that had clung to me for so long. In time, I came to realize that while I could never erase my past actions, I had the chance to create a different narrative moving forward. Tommy became a beacon of resilience for me, a reminder that even the smallest acts could lead to larger transformations. Each conversation carved a path toward healing. It helped open my heart while offering incredible insight into the lives of others. I began volunteering at a local youth center, guiding kids much like the younger Tommy I had wronged, and slowly, I felt that weight lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. Looking back on that summer, I realize how naive I was, how easy it was to slip into cruelty without understanding its burden. Sometimes, the smallest moments can define our futures, and everything I regretted turned into a lesson, a chance to rebuild the kind of person I wanted to be. Update: a few months later, I gathered enough courage to ask Tommy if he would be interested in collaborating on a community project, an inclusive art program for kids, blending creativity and kindness. To my delight, he was thrilled about the idea. Today, we run the program together, offering a safe space for children to express themselves without fear, to create rather than destroy. Sometimes, redemption comes when you least expect it, and from the ashes of my regret, I finally found a reason to hope. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting warm hues across the sky, I stood by a cluster of colorful murals we had completed the week before, each vibrant section a testament to the creativity unleashed within our community. The air was filled with the laughter of children, their giggles weaving together with the soft sounds of nature. It felt surreal, standing there with Tommy, who had become not only a partner but a true friend. We had spent countless evenings brainstorming ideas, and I was still in awe of how far we had come since my confession. I recalled the day I had finally gathered the nerve to reach out to him. My hands shook as I typed the message, reliving all the memories of our childhood and the pivotal moment when everything had spiraled out of control. I remember hesitating, debating whether I should send an apology along with my pitch for a project or if I should simply focus on moving forward together. After a long, sleepless night, I hit send, letting my hopes soar despite the fear of rejection looming over me. When Tommy responded with enthusiasm, I felt a tide of relief wash over me. I would have never anticipated how gracious he could be. Working side by side with him in our new endeavor was like stitching together a patchwork of broken pieces into something truly beautiful. And those children, seeing them gather, picking up their brushes as they painted side by side, created an inexplicable warmth in my chest. I felt like I was a part of something larger than myself, something positive. I watched as they learned to collaborate, encouraging one another, dissolving any hint of doubt with laughter and the joy of creating. Tommy often shared his adventures with the kids, how he would sit on the worn-out grass, giving them pointers while they experimented with colors and textures, fostering not just their artistic minds, but their spirits as well. The program grew, word spread, and soon parents were coming to us, grateful for the outlet we had created, a haven for their kids to explore their feelings and abilities. Yet, amidst the joy that filled these moments, I occasionally felt the quiet tickle of guilt stir within me. Was this enough? Could I ever truly atone for the pain I caused Tommy? I tried to dismiss those thoughts, but even now, years later, they would seep into my moments of reflection. One afternoon, as a golden sunset illuminated the art we had created, I turned to Tommy, ready to unearth the topic I had been avoiding. Do you remember? You know, what happened when we were kids? I want you to know how sorry I truly am for everything. He paused, his brush gliding to a halt as he glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but then that familiar, understanding smile curved on his lips. You know, Alex, I appreciate you saying that. But it's okay. We were kids, and kids make mistakes. I forgave you a long time ago, I just didn't know how to talk about it then. Relief washed over me, and the weight on my shoulders lightened considerably. In that moment, the bond we shared felt even more profound. Forged from both traces of hurt and a new relationship built on trust. As the laughter of children filled the air, mingling with the warmth of dusk, I realized that moving on doesn't always mean forgetting, it sometimes means embracing growth. Our project was thriving, and while my past lingered like a shadow, it was a shadow softened by the light of forgiveness. We were not the same boys anymore, each of us had transformed, with our scars merely hints of our shared history, and the lessons we learned would guide us in nurturing the next generation of artists. In the midst of the children's creativity, I saw a reflection of hope, not just for them but for myself as well. While the past remained a testament to my mistakes, I had forged a new path, one paved with kindness, creativity, and community. As I looked around at the children, their tiny hands smudged with paint and their eyes gleaming with inspiration, I could finally breathe. It felt as if the universe was gently reminding me that redemption is possible, even when you fear it may never come. With Tommy by my side, we moved closer to a brighter future, filled with artistic dreams, and laughter that echoed long after the sun had set. And as I watched the sun dip completely beyond the horizon, I found solace in the silence of a night that promised the dawn of a new day, a new opportunity to be better. Each night after the workshop ended, I found myself lingering a little longer, swept up in the afterglow of creativity and connection. The walls of our community center, once dull and washed out, now gleamed with vibrant murals crafted by the kids, each painted stroke a testament to the voices they were beginning to discover. I often sat on a weathered stool near the large bay window, watching as families started to trickle down the street, their laughter mingling with the fading light. The atmosphere felt electric, charged with possibility, and for the first time in years, the weight of my past didn't pull me down, it buoyed me forward. Tommy would come over after tidying up, bringing with him a steaming. I never set out to ruin anyone's life, but that fateful night, as I sat in front of my laptop with the dim light flickering against the wall, the temptation loomed larger than life. I found myself staring at my English teacher's online account, the very account that had control over my academic fate. It was the end of my sophomore year, and despite my best efforts, my grades were slipping into territory I never imagined I'd face. There were various factors contributing to my decline. My father's unexpected layoff had thrown my household into chaos, and it felt as if every ounce of stability was crumbling around me. I had always been a diligent student, never once worried about failing. But the thought of ending up with a failing grade in an already difficult subject made my stomach churn. I could picture my parents' disappointment, especially my dad, who had always believed in my potential. He'd dreamed of me getting into a great college, a dream that now seemed to slip further out of reach. As the pressure mounted, I noticed that my teacher, Miss Collins, had been particularly hard on me lately, marking down my essays for minor mistakes and offering less encouragement than before. It felt personal, and after a disappointing grade on my latest paper, I thought about how futile it was to keep trying. In a moment of frustration, I recalled hearing from a friend about a simple vulnerability in our school's online system that allowed access to faculty accounts. I'd never been the type to break rules, but the idea began to seep into my thoughts, whispering promises of relief. After tossing and turning for days, the doubt turned to resolve. That evening, as I sat down to research how to disable my teacher's account, I felt an odd mixture of excitement and dread coursing through me. It was almost like a game, except the stakes were my future. The process itself was surprisingly straightforward. I kept reminding myself that this wasn't just about my laziness, it was about unfortunate circumstances. With every click, I felt my ethical boundaries shift a little further. Just this once, I whispered to myself, the words barely escaping my lips as I braced for the fallout. It took less than 10 minutes to find the right settings and disable Ms. Collins's account. The immediate rush felt exhilarating, a wildly irresponsible thrill that coursed through me, but that euphoria was quickly dampened by the weight of the decision I had just made. Days passed, and I experienced a strange sense of relief in my classes. I knew my work would go unnoticed, and I could relax without the suffocating fear of failure hanging over my head. But guilt began to gnaw at me. My classmates' confusion when Ms. Collins was absent only added to the tension. They had no idea that I was at the center of it all, the anonymous puppet master pulling strings in the shadows. Each passing day felt like a mini eternity, the relief once felt now shrouded in shame. Driving home from school one day, I caught a glimpse of my father's hopeful face reflecting on the rearview mirror. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him, and the guilt continued to twist deeper into my subconscious. As I turned onto our street, an unsettling thought surfaced: what if someone found out? The implications began to feel real as I lay awake at night, replaying the moment of my decision over and over. Had I really thought this through? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an abyss, ready to fall at any moment. And then, a call came through my phone one afternoon, a notification from the school board announcing Ms. Collins's unexpected absence due to health reasons, a shock that hit me like a punch to the gut. The mutual blame grew across the students, as they speculated on the cause of her absence. It felt like I was walking in a house of cards, and I had just blown a breath of wind that could bring the whole thing crashing down. Eventually, I chose to come clean. Sitting in front of a blank document hours later, I laid out everything: the pressure, the guilt, and most importantly, the fear of failure that had driven my reckless decision. It felt liberating, this carved-out confession, although I still trembled at what could come next. I sent it directly to Ms. Collins's school email, unsure of how she would react but hoping for understanding rather than punishment. A few days later, I received a reply that wasn't quite what I expected. Ms. Collins thanked me for my honesty, acknowledging the pressures students face and promising to support me rather than punish me. That day, I learned an invaluable lesson about integrity, resilience, and the shared burden of expectations. Feeling incredibly relieved, I stepped into my final exams with a motivation I had previously lacked. I didn't get perfect scores, but I didn't fail either. I learned that sometimes, the weight of our decisions can lead to unexpected revelations and growth. Reflecting on that period of my life, I still get chills when I think about how close I came to crossing a line I would never have been able to return from. To this day, I carry that lesson with me: honesty, integrity, and vulnerability can guide us through even the darkest decisions. Update: a few months later, Ms. Collins and I were paired at a school event, and she brought it up with a smile, acknowledging that my story had encouraged her to open conversations about mental health and pressure with her students. It felt surreal to laugh with her about it, and I understood that every choice matters, rippling across our lives in ways we sometimes can't predict. As I stood there, reminiscing about that surreal evening with Ms. Collins at the school event, a comforting warmth washed over me, stitching together the fragmented pieces of a time when my decision felt like a life or death situation. It was hard to believe that only months ago, I was a desperate teenager, standing on the precipice of failure, feeling invisible under the glaring fluorescent lights of a classroom that echoed with tension and judgment. That year had been a turbulent tide of anxiety and overwhelming expectations, where every test felt like an inescapable wave threatening to crash down on me. I remember how Ms. Collins, with her understated elegance and an ever-watchful eye, often noticed the tremors in our voices during presentations or the way we shuffled nervously in our seats during exams. But what struck me most about her was her passion for making the curriculum engaging, using humor and relatable stories to connect with her students. Somehow, this made the pressure feel even heavier. I didn't just want to meet her standards, I wanted to impress her. When I confronted that moment of vulnerability, the line between device and desperation blurred into that fateful choice. Disabling her account felt like both an act of defiance and a moment of deep betrayal. Yet, the weight of my subsequent guilt transformed into lessons I gradually started to share with my peers about honesty and transparency. After the event, our conversation meandered into deeper territories as we both reflected on how life decisions ripple outwards, subtly shaping the landscapes of our lives in ways we seldom acknowledge. Ms. Collins talked about her experiences, her own struggles with balancing expectations and reality, recounting how she had once been a high-achieving student too, feeling the suffocating pressure of attaining perfection. I listened, enraptured, realizing that behind her authoritative presence was a human being grappling with the same battles we all faced. That evening stands out in my memory more for its laughter than its tension. As we navigated the ebb and flow of our conversation, I felt an indescribable bond forming, one that transcended the boundaries of teacher and student. We were fellow travelers on this winding path of life, taking turns to share our stories, really listening to each other. Eventually, as the event wound down and we dispersed into the night, I walked away with a profound sense of closure and clarity about choices, acknowledging that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives don't define us. What truly matters is how we choose to learn from them and connect with others in the aftermath. Reflecting back now, I see how that incident influenced not just Ms. Collins but the entire class. More students began to speak up, sharing their stress and feeling validated in their struggles. It was a ripple effect, her candid acknowledgement empowering others to be open about their mental health challenges. I took pride in knowing my small act of sabotage had inadvertently sparked a larger conversation about self-worth beyond grades, transforming a potentially divisive moment into a collaborative effort to redefine success. As for me, I embraced my initial fear and shifted it into motivation, becoming an advocate within my school for discussions around mental health awareness, learning how to navigate the murky waters of failure alongside determination. I came to realize that growth isn't linear and that sometimes, we stumble into unexpected openings that allow for healing. And as time goes on, I can't help but wonder how many other stories are interwoven with ours, caught in the web of choices, redemption, and connection, forever rippling across the tapestry of our lives. It reminds me that every action, no matter how small, has its role, be it enlightening or obscure, and leaves an imprint on the heart. After all, we're all just trying to find our way, aren't we? Life continued to unfold in unpredictable ways after that fateful encounter with Ms. Collins at the school event. I found myself reflecting not only on my own journey but also on the lives of my classmates, each of us grappling with our own unique pressures. Every conversation seemed to dance with unspoken stories beneath the surface. I would watch as students shared their ambitions and anxieties, forming delicate threads connecting their aspirations, fears, and the instinctual desire to find safety in numbers. We had all learned to wear our facades, often presenting an image of confidence while battling doubts that gnawed at our insides. The pressure to excel remained heavy, cloaking our days like a fog that never fully lifted. Yet, something began to shift in me. As I grew closer to my peers, I learned snippets of their struggles. Some faced obstacles far greater than my fleeting brush with desperation. A classmate of mine, Jake, had been dealing with the ramifications of a home environment suffused with discord. Another, Sarah, was burdened by the weight of her family's expectations, contemplating medical school while harboring a passion for art. These revelations fostered a sense of camaraderie that seemed to weave us together like a vibrant tapestry. I felt compelled to create a safe space where, perhaps for a moment, we could shed our masks and be vulnerable. So, I organized a small gathering at my house one rainy Friday evening, inviting a few close friends over for a night of games and sharing, without the pressure of grades or judgment looming over us. The air was thick with laughter and the rich aroma of popcorn as we played ridiculous party games and debated who would win in a battle between superheroes. But as the night progressed, I steered the conversation to a quieter course, gently encouraging everyone to share something meaningful. Much to my surprise, the mood shifted from playful banter to genuine revelations. Secrets spilled forth like a release valve. I listened to Jake as he recounted moments of feeling trapped at home, how school felt like both a refuge and a battleground. Sarah opened up about the crushing weight of expectations, sharing her dreams of pursuing art that felt so beyond her family's understanding. As I shared my own story, the absurdity and depth of my decision to hack into Ms. Collins' account, the warmth of acceptance settled over us, binding us closer as we embraced each other's truths. That evening felt magical. It was as if we were stitching new seams into our lives, allowing ourselves to be imperfect and whole in the same breath. Days turned into weeks, and our small gatherings morphed into regular meetings, where we'd share laughter intermingled with vulnerability, creating an environment ripe for growth and support. There was something beautifully comforting in knowing that we each held space for one another. Conversations about our dreams and strategies on how to navigate the murky waters of life filled the air, insignificant moments transformed into significant lessons, the ripples of which spread far beyond our cozy circle. The bonds we forged became an unspoken agreement. We would lift each other up through challenges, remind one another that vulnerability is strength, and dissect the chaos of high school together. By the time graduation approached, I could see the change in my friends. Their faces bore a certain glow, a confidence they hadn't possessed before. We were stepping into new chapters, but whatever uncertainties lay ahead, we now had this constellation of support that sparked the courage to tackle life's unpredictability. On the last day of school, standing outside the building one last time, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the connections we had created. As we hugged, snapped countless pictures, and made promises to stay in touch, I was hit with a profound sense of closure. I knew that the ripples of our choices had tangled beautifully. We were no longer just individuals lost in the struggles of adolescence. We were a group, connected by experiences that molded us into who we had become. In the quiet corners of my mind, I reflected on Ms. Collins and the impact of that one fateful decision. She had not only inspired me to be honest in my struggles but had also unknowingly set off a chain reaction that taught so many of us the value of openness and connection. As we prepared to step into the future, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe for the divine messiness of our intertwining lives and the lessons that inevitably came from forging connections, even in the most unexpected and challenging of circumstances. After all, we're all just navigating uncharted waters, aren't we? It's the kind of story that haunts you in quiet moments, creeping up like the long shadows of dusk before night sets in. As a child, I found solace in the laughter of my friends at the little coffee shop on Elm Street, a place that always felt like home, with its aromatic blend of roasted beans and warm chatter wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. It was a simple life, a predictable circle of mundane joy, until that one evening, everything unraveled in just a heartbeat, leaving a residual ache that I still can't shake off. The moment came disguised as an innocent game of truth or dare. We were a collection of seniors reveling in the fleeting days of high school camaraderie, brimming with carefree energy. Daring one another had always brought us closer, forging bonds that felt unbreakable. But that night, I observed my best friend, Ravi, as he tightened his grip on his trusty phone, the flickering screen illuminating his face with a glow that seemed to carry a hidden weight. When it was his turn, the laughter still buzzing in the air like the last remnants of summer, Ravi chose truth, a decision steeped in our usual banter until suddenly, someone muttered an offhand comment about his girlfriend Amanda, a girl who radiated kindness like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. It was offbeat but lighthearted, poking fun at a moment when she had been a bit too giddy at a party, wearing an outrageous chicken costume, and it spiraled into tossing harmless jabs back and forth, the room charged with laughter, yet Ravi's expression shifted so swiftly, it caught me off guard. The playful air turned dense, heavy with unsaid words, and there it was, the flicker in his eyes, a mix of hurt and anger that crackled like a low flame, a precursor to a storm we didn't see coming. He could have laughed it off, we all wanted him to, but instead, he threw caution to the wind and blurted out words that shattered the atmosphere, revealing a dark thread running through his relationships. Do you know, sometimes I think she's just using me to fill a space in her life. And that chicken suit? I wouldn't be surprised if it was to highlight how foolish we are together. The statement hung in the air, thick and suffocating, every laughter instantaneously dying away as a bitter silence enveloped us. I remember feeling my stomach drop, my heart racing because I recognized the sudden change in the room's energy. I wanted to shake him, to pull him back from the brink, but those words slipped out so easily, like peeling a dried leaf, revealing the fragile stem beneath. We all sat there, frozen, as Amanda's face drained of color. The laughter had transformed into a silence that felt like a chain tightening around our necks. The subsequent moments played out like a slow-motion disaster. Amanda's eyes filled with a cocktail of confusion and hurt, a raw look that carved itself deep in my memory. In that blink of time, Ravi had effectively mishandled a relationship built on laughter and mutual support, devolving it into a series of insidious doubts and criticisms. I watched as Amanda left, her footsteps echoing softly against the pavement outside the cafe, the door a barrier between the normalcy we had known and the aftermath of one careless moment. Ravi, once buoyant and secure, was suddenly a hollow version of himself, guilt creeping in like a thief under the cover of night. The lively chatter between us evaporated, replaced with awkward glances and fidgeting hands, an innocent game transformed into the catalyst for his unraveling. Days turned into weeks, and it wasn't long before the repercussions spiraled like a whirlwind. Ravi couldn't face Amanda after that, buried under a blanket of guilt and frayed nerves, and his isolation became palpable. He missed her laughter, her light, and maybe that's what made it worse, watching him realize that his careless words had shattered the bond they had crafted with so much joy. I remember sitting beside him in our usual booth, the shadow of that night lurking between us, like an unwanted guest, as he stared out the window, lost in a different kind of game. Friends tried to reach out, tried to talk to him, but he retreated further into himself, crafting barriers where there once were connections. I wrestled with my own emotions, feeling helpless, wishing I could rewind the past and snatch those words from the air like fluttering leaves caught in the wind. As time went on, I noticed that the laughter we once shared transformed into whispers behind closed doors, and eventually, Ravi drifted away from the circle entirely, a ghost to the faces he once knew. The realization struck me heavy, like the turning of a page that would never be read again. In just a matter of minutes, he not only ruined a relationship but also splintered his sense of self and our friendship, as if he'd unwittingly untied a knot that bound our lives together. Reflecting on it now, I can't help but wonder how different things might have been had he chosen a different path that night, had he opted for a lighter dare instead of bearing his insecurities and fears. In this quiet wrinkle of my memory, Ravi's story serves as a subtle reminder of the power words hold, their potential to uplift or pierce through the fabric of our lives, demonstrating how swiftly life can change when we least expect it, leading to inevitable reflections on what we hold dear and the fragility of our connections. As for Ravi, well, he eventually reached out to me on a rainy evening several months later, after countless days of silence, stating simply, "I hope she'll forgive me," and in response to those words, I found myself still hanging tight to the echoes of laughter, forever wishing for a reunion over that familiar cup of coffee. I could only nod, realizing that sometimes, restoring those broken bridges takes time and effort, and perhaps, a willingness to confront the truth we buried under layers of regret. As the droplets danced rhythmically against my window that night, I couldn't shake the memories of the last time Ravi and I had met, echoes of laughter and shared stories still lingering in the corners of my mind. It had been during that warm afternoon in late spring, the sunlight filtering through the lush trees of the tiny cafe where we often spent our weekends. We were carefree then, lost in conversation about our dreams, interspersed with plans of adventure that felt infinite in their potential. But as life often does, it yanked us from that blissful inertia into a reality rife with choices, each one a fork in the road waiting to be taken. The shift had been sudden, a phone call, a panicked conversation in hushed tones, and subsequent decisions made in sheer haste. In my naivety, I thought that our bond would weather any storm. Ravi's act of desperation, however, had left a fracture precisely where I least expected it. The message he sent that evening was cradled within the complexities of our shared history. I could feel my heart tugging in two directions, one pulling me toward the past, where everything felt safe and familiar, and the other gnawing at me with the weight of uncertainty. At first, responding felt daunting. I stared at my phone long enough that I could almost hear the ticking of my heartbeat, each pulsation echoing my indecision. Would forgiving him be too easy? Or would it leave me open to more hurt? I thought. Maybe it was me who needed to forgive myself for allowing the facade of invulnerability to blind me to the inherent fragility of human connections. I took a deep breath, recalling the moments we had shared, the ones that had built the foundation of what I thought would last a lifetime. Perhaps the past did not hold the power to define our future. I finally typed out, "It's not about forgiveness, Ravi. It's about understanding and finding a way to move forward." The flickering light from the street cast transient shadows across my living room, and in that stillness, I could almost hear the past whispering to me, urging for closure. Days turned into weeks as we exchanged texts, dismantling the walls of tension brick by brick. Eventually, we found ourselves face to face once again, under the same old cafe awning, its familiar aroma of brewing coffee rising to greet us. The conversation felt a bit stilted at first, but as we sipped our drinks, the laughter began to trickle back into our repartee like a slow, steady stream. We ventured into conversations that unearthed buried feelings, explored regrets as carefully as one might sift through old photographs, trying to make sense of it all. As Ravi shared his experience of that life-altering decision, the clarity of his remorse wove through each word, heavy with the knowledge that it was not just his life that had unraveled in minutes, it was a tapestry of bonds, trust, and affection that had hung precariously on a wall shared with many, and in that intricately woven space was the reality of pain and healing that sometimes felt insurmountable. Listening to him, I couldn't help but feel a collective understanding that our stories, while undeniably personal, belong to a more universal narrative, a dance between love and loss, hope and despair. Each experience echoed the knowledge that we are all just trying to navigate our paths through this chaotic symphony called life. Hours melted away as we reminisced, our laughter enveloping the cafe, which seemed to cradle us in its familiar embrace. Perhaps the most liberating moment came when I noticed that, in allowing ourselves to confront the past, we had freed the present to shine through, unburdened. There was a sense of grace and understanding that connections, while fragile, also hold immense strength when nourished with communication, empathy, and honesty. As I walked home that evening, I carried with me a renewed hope, a subtle but undeniable shift in my heart. I had learned that time holds a certain magic. It doesn't eliminate pain, but rather, teaches us to cohabitate with it, redefining what it means to forgive and be forgiven. Whether or not our paths would run parallel again, I felt lighter, as if the shadows that had quietly lingered were finally beginning to lift. Perhaps there would come a day when Ravi and I would share another cup of coffee, this time a celebration of resilience, a testament to our journeys filled with missteps leading to redemption. Or perhaps, in the grand tapestry of life, we would simply find ourselves caught by chance in the tapestry of moments, still reaching out for those bridges, a little more tender than before, understanding of the immense fragility that we all shared. It was a realization that life is but a flicker of time, a collection of minutes where decisions can break intricate patterns or redirect them towards new beginnings, and ultimately, we become the authors of our own stories. The week following Ravi's message, as the rain drizzled down my window and formed little rivers that traced irregular paths down the glass, I felt a profound shift in my heart. The gray clouds outside reflected the mixture of uncertainty and hope swirling inside me. I thought about how quickly things can spiral, how, in mere moments, a decision can cascade, changing everything that follows. Ravi had not only lost a relationship, he had unwittingly set off a chain reaction that upended his life and the lives of those around him. The regret in his voice that night lingered in my mind like an echo, a reminder of the precariousness of every choice we make. I imagined him in that coffee shop where we shared countless laughs, now perhaps sitting alone, sipping something bitter while staring into nothingness. I remembered a time, long before his fall from grace, when we sat at that same cafe, our dreams spilling over our mugs as we plotted our futures with an eagerness that seemed to belong only to the young and unburdened. But life has a way of catching up with you, I mused. Often when you least expect it. I decided then to reach out, to suggest we meet. Surely, there was healing in confronting the past, in standing side by side and daring to speak of what had happened, rather than letting it hang in the air like that final, awkward question before a departure. It took only a short message, a casual invitation framed in care and the memories of laughter, for him to respond with enthusiasm laced with a weariness that told me he had been waiting for this moment. We settled on a small, quaint cafe, the kind that held the charm of an old friend, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods wafted through the air, wrapping around us like a warm embrace. When I arrived, I spotted him at our usual table, a slightly worn look on his face, a testament to both time and the struggles that occupied it. The once vibrant spark in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a glimmer of hope tucked behind a veil of regret. As we exchanged pleasantries and sat down, the air felt thick, charged with unspoken words and a potent mix of what-ifs. I couldn't help but notice how we both had changed. The innocence of our younger selves seemed impossibly distant. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," he began, his voice barely a whisper, and I could sense the weight of the walls around his heart crumbling slowly. We revisited memories, the good and the painful, and somewhere amidst the stream of shared laughter and sorrow, there emerged a fragility more profound than I ever anticipated. Ravi confessed how one misstep transformed his once promising future into an abyss of sadness, a single night where poor choices redefined his relationships and shattered long-held dreams. He spoke of his wake-up calls, the sleepless nights, and the relentless thought of how he had torn apart the very threads that connected him to the people who mattered most. I listened, each word a brushstroke painting the stark rawness of his journey, one that had changed him in ways I could scarcely comprehend. Yet amidst the confessions, I also felt a stirring of admiration for the courage he displayed in standing before me, owning his mistakes with humility rather than bitterness. As the conversation deepened, narratives intertwined, and we rediscovered that the essence of our friendship remained intact, nestled under layers of experience and time like treasures forgotten yet cherished. The moment felt electric, transformative even, as we gradually ventured into those tender territories of forgiveness and understanding. I could finally voice how I had felt during those haunting months of silence, how the echoes of our camaraderie had haunted me in odd moments, how easy it had been to slip into narratives of anger and resentment instead of compassion and patience. His eyes reflected understanding, and we both recognized the beauty and acceptance in recognizing our human flaws. By the end of our conversation, something shifted in both of us, an unspoken agreement that healing wasn't about erasing the past but about embracing it, weaving it into our ongoing saga rather than letting it define us. As I stood to leave, I looked back at him, a smile breaking over my face, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt light, untethered from the burden of past mistakes. We exchanged promises to meet again, and reluctantly, I watched him leave with a tentative hope stirring in my chest. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the world washed anew, glistening under a timid sun breaking through the clouds, much like us. As I walked home, I reflected on our meeting. Life is indeed a series of fleeting minutes, and in every one of those moments, we are granted the chance to reclaim what was lost, to celebrate resilience, and to recognize that while we may stumble, we always have the power to rise again, a little wiser and a little kinder to ourselves in the face of fragility. Confession: I did something terrible this past couple of weeks. It all started when I received a call from an old friend, Derek, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and his voice felt like a distant echo of a happier time. We had been inseparable during our university days in an art program, dreaming of gallery shows and creative lives, but life had taken us down different paths. Derek moved to a bustling city to chase fame, while I settled back in our quiet hometown, working an unfulfilling job that barely allowed me to keep my modest apartment. When he called, it continued as a casual catch-up, where laughter mingled with nostalgia, but subtly there was something beneath his jovial tone, a weight. He was discouraged by how his art career was stagnating. He talked about unsuccessful exhibitions and a lack of inspiration, and with every word, a gnawing guilt unfurled inside me. You see, Derek was always the talented one, bold and expressive, while I lingered in his shadow, quietly scribbling away, sharing my works only with a select few, too afraid of criticism. He ended the call with an invitation. Come visit, he said, I need a fresh pair of eyes, a friend who believes in me. The excitement swallowed me whole, but along with that excitement was a pit of dread as I began to think about the situation more closely. When I arrived at his downtown loft, filled with canvases and clutter, I felt a strange cocktail of admiration and envy pulsing through my veins. He seemed so alive, but that spark of creativity I once knew looked like it was flickering out, and as I sat in his studio, watching him paint half-hearted strokes, I couldn't shake this voice in my head whispering that he might need a push. After a few days of playful banter and wine, I sat down with him one evening, the dim lights casting our shadows against the walls, and I revealed a secret I had kept for far too long. I had a collection of sketches and paintings that I knew could get him noticed, and for a fleeting moment, I believed I was doing the right thing. I borrowed pieces from my own portfolio and claimed them as unfinished works of his for one of the biggest local art events happening in a few weeks. My heart raced at the thought of heaving some semblance of success into his life, even if it was tangled in deception. Derek, eager yet oblivious, embraced the idea, turning the wheels of our old dreams as I created an email to submit the work while waiting through sleepless nights of nervous anticipation. The day of the exhibition arrived, and we stood shoulder to shoulder, our bones vibrating with excitement. The crowd was a blur, a tapestry of strangers and art lovers who came to whisper and ponder. My heart sank, melting under the weight of guilt every time someone praised the pieces as Derek's. I could feel his pride swelling with every compliment, yet all I could think about were the artists out there who had poured their souls into their work, unaware that their creativity was becoming a mask for my flaws. As the night progressed, I watched him flourish, drawing attention, and my heart ached as the applause solidified everything I had wrongfully constructed. I should have felt proud, yet each cheer drove a dagger further into my conscience. Did Derek deserve this? And what would happen when the truth unveiled itself? As the exhibition came to a close, the ominous specter of my deceit loomed large. The guilt I had buried began clawing its way to the surface, and I couldn't sleep those nights, my mind plagued with thoughts of what I had done. A week passed, and I knew I had to come clean. I told Derek about my deception in the cold light of dawn, our voices intermingling in a silence that felt heavier than words. He stared at me, shock morphing into a deep hurt, and suddenly I realized I had turned our friendship into a frayed thread hanging onto nothing. In that moment, all the laughter we had shared faded like the morning mist, and I could feel my world crumbling. Now, as I sit in my dimly lit apartment, I can't shake the guilt that has rooted itself into my bones. I wonder constantly if Derek, in all his talent, will find a way to forgive me, or if he will carry this betrayal like a stone in his pocket, a reminder of our broken bond. A part of me wishes I could take it all back, return to that moment when the lies began to weave themselves into our reality, but the truth is already out there, dancing in the ruins of what was once an innocent ambition. Derek hasn't contacted me since, and I doubt he ever will. I can only hope he finds his way back to the canvas, away from shadows of falsehood. So, here I confess, with no one left to share this burden with, an ache in my chest that serves as a reminder of the lines I crossed, and somewhere within, a flicker of hope that maybe next time, instead of reaching for validation, I'll have the courage to invite my friend to truly see me, and perhaps find healing in the genuine expression we both sought. Update: it's been a couple of months since that fateful night. I haven't spoken to Derek, but I recently saw him featured in an article about local artists making waves. He was collaborating with another artist, showcasing work that felt authentically him. I felt a strange mix of pride and heartbreak. He has continued to thrive, and now, I need to step back and allow him to own his narrative. I've begun to paint again, returning to my roots, but this time, I'm doing so with honesty, and although it feels like a small step, it's one towards becoming a better version of myself, one that refuses to tiptoe around the truth. Confession: I did something terrible this past couple of weeks. Looking back, it feels as if a fog has lifted, the air is clearer now, and I can finally see the contours of the mistakes I made. The truth is, though it felt like a suffocating weight for so long, I've begun to embrace the complexity of my emotions, transforming it into a canvas that reflects my journey. After that initial rush of seeing Derek's name splashed across the pages of that article, I made a promise to myself, not just to paint again, but to paint boldly. The same week, I decided to sign up for a local art class, held in a sun-drenched loft downtown. The teacher was this vibrant woman named Lila, who had an infectious enthusiasm that ignited a spark within me. In that studio, surrounded by misfit artists, college students, retirees, professionals turning dreams into night work, I felt a sense of belonging settle upon me like a warm shawl. Each brushstroke carried the weight of unspoken apologies and unprocessed emotions, and with every sigh of paint meeting canvas, I found fragments of my old self surfacing. However, amidst this catharsis, I couldn't entirely shake my guilt. I struggled with the realization that while I was finally becoming honest about my feelings and expressing them through art, I'd torn down the walls of another person without fully understanding the repercussions. I thought of Derek often, especially when Lila praised the way I bled emotion into my pieces, the raw truth of them echoing in the folds of color and shadow, yet I found no way to convey this internal tug-of-war during our brief, casual chats after class. Then, one evening as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon and cast the studio in shadows, I picked up my brush to begin a new piece. My mind wandered to the last conversation Derek and I had before everything fell apart. I painted his favorite shade of blue, the deep, oceanic color that always reminded me of calm amidst chaos, and I poured into it everything: the heartbreak, the regret, the fleeting moments of happiness, and the darker, uglier truth of hindsight that I had ignored for too long. It was reckless, really, an emotional dumping ground, but it felt right in a world where I had tried so hard to control the narrative, to silence the chaos instead of embracing it. One night, while working late, I sat back and looked at the completed painting, an abstract representation of our tumultuous past, half void of clarity, half teeming with possibility. I was overwhelmed by the emotion that clung to it like dew, and just then, the unthinkable happened. Lila walked by, glanced at my canvas, and gasped. "This is incredible. You've captured a profound depth here," she said, and I felt both exhilaration and suffocating guilt twist in my stomach. Had I really just bared my soul, albeit unknowingly, to the world? Later, after class, I stayed behind, my heart hammering as I prepared to wrap my painting, intending to submit it for the upcoming showcase. The idea of sharing this piece with others terrified me. What if they saw the remnants of my mistakes, the pieces of Derek strewn across the canvas like lost puzzle pieces? I couldn't ignore the knot of anxiety that settled in my chest. Yet, primarily, I couldn't ignore the truth: this was about me reclaiming my own story. The showcase approached faster than I anticipated, and with it came a supposed peace of mind, knowing I was finally stepping into the light instead of lurking in the shadows. When the night finally arrived, I stood in front of my painting under the dim lights, watching as others lost themselves in its depth. Then, to my sheer astonishment, I saw Derek walk through the door, his face illuminated by surprise as he spotted my work. I was frozen, caught between the fear of his perception and the hope of a reconnection. He walked closer, weaving through the crowd, and when he reached my painting, his eyes widened and spoke without words. They flitted over the colors and shapes, and I saw the moment recognition flooded him. I felt my heart race with a mixture of dread and excitement at the thought of him seeing through the brushstrokes to the person behind it. The world around us shrank, and before I could say anything, he turned to me, vulnerability etched across his features. This is truly beautiful," he said, his voice steady yet soft. In that moment, I caught my breath and felt the weight lift, even if just for a heartbeat. I nodded, my throat tight. It's everything I couldn't say before. His expression softened even more, sadness pooling in his warm brown eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. For a split second, we were draped in a shared silence, the past swirling between us, intricate and painful, yet oddly comforting in its familiarity. Slowly, cautiously, we began to discuss our journeys over the past few months, how he had channeled his creative energy into collaborations and how I had turned mine into this raw honesty, and as we spoke, I realized the gap that had once felt impossible to bridge was narrowing. There would not be a tidy resolution or a perfectly wrapped ending, but in our open exchange, I could sense the flicker of hope, the possibility of both healing and understanding going forward. Our paths had diverged in ways we hadn't expected, yet there was still a part of us that needed to navigate this newfound honesty together. In the days that followed, we began to reconnect, vulnerable yet cautious, allowing ourselves grace as we rediscovered each other in the light of what we had both created, art crafted from pain and resilience. I think back on that time now with a bittersweet reminiscence, allowing myself the space to feel pride for how far I've come. I still paint, still share, and still embrace the unfolding narrative of my story. I've learned to let the brush speak for me while crafting my own truth under the ever-turning canvas of life, one brushstroke at a time. As the days turned into weeks, my small home studio became my sanctuary, a place where I allowed every emotion to spill forth onto the canvas. The soft hum of my music intertwined with the whispers of distant storms rolling outside, and each time I dipped my brush into the vibrant hues of my thoughts, it felt as if I were shedding the layers of my old self. I began to explore themes of connection and disconnection, joy and sorrow, using colors that embodied the spectrum of human experience. The canvases seemed to breathe with life, and I often found myself lost in the process, the world around me fading away as I immersed myself in this newfound dialogue between heart and hand. One afternoon, while layering a particularly haunting shade of blue, representing the cool depth of longing, I received a text from Derek. It was simple, yet profound. Would you like to see the gallery showing next weekend? I'd love to hear your thoughts. My heart raced and my hands trembled, both from excitement and the weight of what was about to unfold. I hadn't seen him in person since that split, and while I yearned for connection, I feared where it might lead us. Still, I clicked the response button before my hesitation could echo in my thoughts. I'd love to, Derek. I'm excited to see your work. The exchange felt innocuous, but I knew better. Beneath the surface of those words lay the years of friendship we had shared, the love that remained like a ghost between us, and the unspoken wounds yearning for closure. As the day approached, I busied myself painting, though each stroke felt laced with the nerves bubbling beneath my skin. I imagined what Derek's work would look like, how he would have evolved as an artist, and what stories he would share with his audience. The gallery was vibrant with life, walls decorated with familiar motifs that I remembered from our own collaborations, yet something was notably different. This felt like a powerful shift in both his art and our relationship. When I arrived, I spotted him from across the room, standing tall beside his latest pieces, the space around him a swirl of admirers. I hesitated, feeling like an intruder at a celebration I wasn't sure I belonged in. But then, he turned, and our eyes met. Time seemed to pause for just a heartbeat as we shared a moment of recognition. I could see the vulnerability masked behind his professional demeanor, the same vulnerability we had both learned to navigate through our respective art. I approached slowly, as if stepping onto a canvas for the first time, unsure of the exact colors I might find. Your work is incredible, Derek, I finally said, my voice steady as I gestured toward a piece that captured the tension of an elusive connection. I love how you've portrayed the struggle. His smile was warm, but there was a flicker of something deeper, perhaps surprise, or perhaps relief. Thank you. It means a lot to hear that from you. I've really poured myself into it. After exchanging pleasantries that echoed our careful steps into this newly redefined friendship, we began to walk along the gallery, his commentary painting the air with anecdotes of his experiences. I shared lighter stories of my own artistic journey, how the frame of my paintings had now found a wider scope, filled with the honesty I'd only just begun to embrace. As the evening went on, and glasses clinked with laughter, I felt the familiar warmth of camaraderie blossoming between us, rekindled and infused with this raw sincerity. The night turned surreal, wrapping around us in a comforting blanket of shared histories and dreams yet unshared. But just as I began to feel the old comfort of our connection return, there was a pause, a moment where silence fell, not awkward, but contemplative. He turned to me, eyes searching, and asked, "What was the hardest part for you?" After it all ended, I mean. I inhaled deeply, feeling the gravity of his question settle between us. This wasn't just a conversation, this was a reckoning, a step into vulnerability. Honestly? Letting go of the guilt, I confessed, finding the words as they formed in my mind. I painted about it, you know. How it felt to feel like a thief of happiness. It was hard to accept that I was part of the pain. He nodded, understanding, lighting his features. You weren't a thief, you were a person caught in a difficult place. I was too. We both were. His hand brushed against mine, just a slip of connection, but it felt monumental, crackling with potential. I've had to forgive myself for not being strong enough to handle things differently. We can only grow from where we start. In that moment, under the glow of the gallery lights, amid the scent of fresh paint and polished wood, I realized how much I had learned in this journey. The shadows of our past no longer loomed with the same weight, instead, they became part of the intricate patterns of our ongoing story. As we parted that night, having exchanged not just pleasantries but deeper truths, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, perhaps not the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new one, an evolution of the relationship we thought had faded. And so, as I returned to the studio, my heart felt lighter, ready to embrace whatever was next, understanding that honesty, like art, requires time to fully develop. The brush continued to find its rhythm in my hand as I created not just paintings, but a new narrative, a reflection of comfort, growth, and the unyielding beauty of connection, all witnessed on the canvas of our lives, where every stroke told a story. A few weeks later, I would find myself back at that gallery for another showing, this time not merely an observer but an active participant in a narrative we were crafting together, hand in hand through paint and memories, finding solace in the acknowledgement that every ending births a new beginning. I never thought I would find myself reflecting deeply on intimacy at this age, but lately, it seems to occupy my thoughts more than I ever anticipated. At 72 years old, I sit at the kitchen table of my modest but cozy home, the sunlight streaming through the window and casting soft patterns on the tablecloth. The faint sound of a grandfather clock ticks in the background, a gentle reminder of time passing in the quiet hours. I've been married to Margaret for nearly 50 years, and while we both have found ways to enjoy each other's company, I can't help but notice the shadows cast by the years. When we first got together, our nights were filled with energy and passion, the kind that fills the air with crackling electricity. I remember how we would sneak kisses in the kitchen while the pasta boiled over, how our laughter would echo in the empty halls after the children were asleep. It felt endless, exhilarating. But now, it often feels like we're going through the motions. Our conversations have shifted from dreams and plans to pragmatic discussions about medications and doctor's appointments, passion replaced with comfort, and yet there's something comforting about that too, isn't there? But last week, something shifted in me, a long-buried curiosity sparked by an unexpected conversation between Margaret and her sister, who was visiting. They laughed easily over shared memories, and I caught snippets of their chat concerning not only their health but also fragments of intimacy. After all these years, I was stunned by their honesty. Something inside me stirred, a faint ember of desire reigniting. After they left, I awkwardly broached the subject with Margaret, our relationship often tending towards old routines and familiar silences when it came to discussing something so personal. Do you think people our age still? Well, you know? I ventured carefully, my cheeks warming as those words stumbled out clumsily. She paused, a glimmer of surprise in her eyes, then smiled softly, her hands resting on her lap. I think they do, if they want to, she replied, her voice quieter than usual. It was a simple answer, but it felt like a doorway opening, revealing uncharted territory. We held a hesitant dialogue peppered with nervous laughter, memories of our youth spilling over into this new understanding that intimacy didn't necessarily dwindle as one aged but transformed in unforeseen ways. However, I still wrestled with doubts. Could I even make her feel desired? Would I even want to? The next evening, as we settled into our familiar nightly routine, I made a bold decision. I lit a few candles and played soft jazz in the background, a scene eerily reminiscent of our early days. Margaret looked at me, a curiosity sparking in her eyes, and it seemed for a moment we were both peering through time, stepping into an era we thought we'd left behind. I took her hand, and together we ventured into a conversation about our fears and desires. I admitted that I sometimes found myself longing for the kinds of intimacy we had before, the laughter, the warmth, the connection. To my surprise, Margaret confided in me that she had felt similarly, that while the days of wild passion might be behind us, she still yearned for closeness, the kind that transcended physicality, running deep as the roots of our long shared life. In a way, it freed us both. We began exploring what intimacy could look like now. It wasn't always easy, but it became a journey we embarked on together rather than apart, a dance of sorts to rediscover ourselves after years of being swept up in day-to-day life. I learned to appreciate the little moments, the way she looked at me just before bed, the gentle kisses we shared that spoke volumes of the love we felt. Although we might not physically connect the same way anymore, that doesn't diminish our bond. As the months pass, I've found comfort in the quiet intimacy of simply being with her, and it feels like we've woven ourselves closer together than ever before. Sometimes, it feels like the world has a way of nudging us into rediscovery, reminding us that love is a tapestry, one that evolves through experiences and time. In some ways, the conversations we have now feel even richer than they used to, filled with decades of laughter and compromise, lessons learned, and dreams still clinging to the edges of our hearts. And while the journey may not have led us back to the youthful lust of years gone by, it has brought us to a place of tenderness and understanding, one that feels infinitely worthwhile. Update: just last night, Margaret suggested we take a dance class together, something we had always talked about but never got around to in our younger years. As I helped her into her coat, I felt an exhilarating thrill I thought had long faded. A new chapter awaits us both, maybe even more rewarding than we could have ever dreamed, proving that love remains vibrant, even amid life's shadows. As I stood there, feeling the warmth of Margaret's happiness radiating off her, I couldn't help but marvel at how life had a way of circling back, of offering second chances when you least expected them. Dancing had always been a passion of ours, a shared dream we chatted about during late nights with glasses of wine, our young hearts believing we would always have time for it. But as life often does, it weaved in obligations, careers, and family, pushing our whims aside until they became distant echoes. Last night, however, while we sipped chamomile tea at the kitchen table, Margaret's eyes sparkled with a youthful enthusiasm that ignited something deep within me. "Let's finally do it," she said, her voice playful but sincere. I felt a flutter of excitement. Our days were often filled with simple routines, watching the afternoon sun cast golden hues over the garden, tending to our roses, or bickering about the best way to prepare a casserole. But this suggestion felt like an invitation to break free from those small rhythms and embrace something bigger, something alive. The image of us, hand in hand, swaying to music we might not remember but that would surely come rushing back to us, made me suddenly aware of how much I missed that spontaneous spirit. The next day, I found myself standing outside the local dance studio, butterflies fluttering in my stomach as I took in the pastel pink walls, the bright posters of couples turning elegantly under bright lights. I remembered all those times we had pulled each other into our small living room, a dimly lit space where we would crank up the old record player, twirling awkwardly, letting the music lead us into laughter instead of grace. As I stepped inside, the scent of polished wood mixed with faint notes of perfume filled my senses, another layer of nostalgia wrapping around my thoughts. Margaret arrived not long after, a vibrant ensemble of colors that made her stand out amidst the other dancers' muted clothing. Her smile was wide, a mix of pride and a hint of nervousness, and in that moment, I knew we were both stepping into the unknown together. The instructor welcomed us, a kind-hearted woman with hair like spun silver who seemed to dance through the air rather than walk. She made us feel welcomed, helping to ease our nerves, and soon we found ourselves with a few other couples, learning basic steps to a waltz. The music hung in the air, a gentle stream of melodies that caressed our hesitant movements. As we practiced, I felt Margaret's hand clasped tightly around mine, our mismatched rhythm becoming a shared heartbeat. I couldn't help but chuckle at our lack of coordination. It was as if our bodies were reluctant to remember what they once knew so well. But the laughter, the laughter was the best part. Every misstep led to bursts of joy, and each twirl brought us closer together, weaving new memories that felt like ribbons tying our lives in a joyful knot. I noticed Margaret's face bloom under the soft glow of studio lights, her cheeks flushed, not from the exertion but from rediscovering a part of herself that had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. My heart felt light as I watched her revel in the music, her feet moving in sync with mine, even if we fumbled along the way. The shyness we experienced in our earlier years melted away, replaced by an openness to be vulnerable with one another, an understanding that our age brought a kind of freedom we never anticipated. As weeks turned into months, our dance classes became a sanctum for our love. We would practice in the living room, blinds drawn and music loud enough for the neighbors to hear the joyful chaos. We stumbled and laughed our way through steps, finding our flow in the intimate spaces of our home. Each dance became a dialogue, a way to express what we often left unspoken in our day-to-day lives, turning our bodies into the very words we sometimes struggled to articulate. With every spin and every close embrace, I discovered shades of Margaret that I hadn't seen in decades. Her spirit shimmered brighter than the fading daylight that stretched across our living room floor, a reminder of the connection we'd cultivated over the years. It was more than just learning to dance, it was like peeling back layers of time to reveal the vibrant souls we had once been. And so, our dance journey transformed into something deeper, an exploration of intimacy that I hadn't expected at this stage in our lives. One evening, as we swayed in the soft light, Margaret looked up at me with a glimmer in her eye, whispering that this felt just as fulfilling as any passion we had shared in our youth. Her words wrapped around my heart, stirring emotions I hadn't touched in years, illuminating the fact that our journey wasn't just about the steps, it was about learning how to lead and follow together, how to trust each other both on the dance floor and off it. Before our first major performance, an end-of-term showcase where friends and family would watch, we stood backstage, taking a moment to breathe. I felt her hand grasp mine with fierce determination, her eyes locking onto mine as she said, "No matter how it goes tonight, I'm proud of us." I understood then, more than ever, that life, with all its complexities and challenges, had led us here, not to perfection, but to a celebration of love in its purest form. As the music began, we stepped onto that polished floor, dissolving into the flowing rhythm. We weren't just practicing our dance, we were unveiling a new chapter of us, a testament to love that matured like wine, deepening with time. And as I spun her around, the applause enveloped us, an echo not just of our performance but a culmination of a lifetime of love, laughter, and new beginnings that would perhaps last us until the very end. Yet it was that warmth of her hand in mine, the laughter that floated into the air, and the joy of sharing something we had once let slip away that stayed with me, reminding me that growth and love are forever entwined, steadily guiding us even through the shadows. It felt as if the universe had conspired to give us this gift, a gentle nudge that reminded us both that life is a dance, and every step we take, regardless of age, leads us back to the heart of what it means to be truly alive. As the days melted into weeks following that delightful suggestion, I found myself enveloped in a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt since the early days of our relationship. Margaret and I were scheduling our dance classes, those precious hours soon occupying a place on our calendar surrounded by mundane appointments. I chuckled one day as I crossed out a dentist visit and wrote in "Dance with Margaret, 7 p.m., relishing how the very act of arranging our new endeavor felt almost rebellious in its simplicity. Our classes were held at the local community center, a place I had driven past countless times but never thought to enter. The building, once unfamiliar, soon became a sanctuary for our blossoming connection. Walking hand in hand past the classes in session, I marveled at the energy radiating from the younger couples, their laughter mixing with the swish of fabric and the shuffle of shoes against polished floors. Occasionally, Margaret would tease me, claiming I had 2 left feet, but I found joy in the playful banter. Each step, even the ones awkwardly learned, was more than just a movement, it became an opportunity to explore ourselves as partners again. The rhythm of life, the little joys of spinning her around, or catching her gaze as we misstepped, reminded me of the playful dance of our early romance. One quiet Wednesday evening, after a particularly invigorating class, we found ourselves on the center floor, surrounded by soft amber lights and the lingering echoes of music. The instructor had left us to practice on our own, and as the last notes faded away, I pulled Margaret close. I could feel her heartbeat synchronizing with mine. It was as if the world outside had dissolved, leaving just us trapped in our tiny universe. In that embrace, I dared to whisper sweet nothings, my words laden with affection as I praised her grace, her beauty, the way she always managed to make the ordinary feel magical. Her laughter, a soft chime, filled the space and lifted the very essence of what we had fought for over the years. "Can you believe we're doing this?" she mused, her eyes sparkling like the stars we often gazed up at from our porch. In that moment, looking into her eyes, I realized how far we had come from the complacency that once threatened to sway between us like an unwelcome breeze. We were redefining intimacy, not just through touch, but through these shared experiences that united our spirits. As we left that night, the chill of the evening air embraced us, but it was the warmth of her presence that kept the cold at bay. We strolled through the neatly lined streets, our laughter bubbling over like old times, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Each step toward our home became a pathway lined with memories from our past but illuminated by the newfound joys we were crafting together. Weeks turned into months, and our weekly classes turned into a ritual I held dear. I noticed subtle changes blooming in Margaret, as if she carried a light within her that hadn't flickered in years. It was in the way she danced through the kitchen while cooking, or how she surprised me with spontaneous hugs filled with a zest for life. One would think that as we passed the threshold of 70, we should be slowing down, but instead, we were speeding towards a vibrancy I never thought possible. We had become fixtures in our dance class, learning the tango and salsa, both of which challenged our bodies but also made us laugh through the awkwardness of it all. Of a Tuesday afternoon, while everyone was out watching the world unfold, we found the courage to enroll ourselves in a local dance competition. I worried about the footwork and whether we would appear ridiculous, but Margaret held my hand and assured me we could tackle anything together. The day of the competition arrived with a flurry of excitement and nerves rippling through the atmosphere. We dressed in our best, Margaret in a flowing dress that twirled like a bloom around her as she moved, and me in a crisp button-up that felt both new yet familiar. Standing back to back beneath a makeshift arch adorned with flowers, I could sense that this event, regardless of the outcome, was a celebration of us, our journey, our resilience, our laughter. When the music started, it was as if we melded into one, our bodies responding together like a perfect melody, pulsating to the rhythm of our hearts. I could see from the corner of my eye the crowd smiling. Younger couples stood in awe while the more seasoned spectators murmured words of encouragement. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't about winning or losing but about reclaiming the thrill of living boldly. By the time we reached the end of our final spin, the applause was a roar, and I caught a glimpse of Margaret's face, her joy radiating like sunlight, proving that aging did not extinguish passion, it enriched it. When the trophies were handed out, our names were called not for first place, but for something even more poignant, the Best Spirit Award. It felt like a gentle affirmation of our efforts rather than a setback, a trophy representing playfulness and the audacity to embrace each moment. As we stood on that stage, side by side surrounded by laughter and clapping, I marveled at how far we had ventured together, from the quiet moments of complacency to this incredible, shared journey enriched by love. In reflection, I realized that life has a way of surprising us, even when shadows loom, and love remains vibrant through tender gestures, adventure, and the willingness to dance cheek to cheek into the unknown. As we sank back into our cozy home that night, warmed by the flicker of candlelight and the weight of our shared experiences, I knew we had only just begun to explore the beautiful dance of love that continues to grow, its rhythm echoing softly through the years, reminding us that every step we take leads us back to the core of what it means to feel alive, together. Confession: I, 20F, am haunted by the things I did as a teenager, and I've never managed to shake the feeling that I'm still being punished for it. It was during my sophomore year of high school that everything spiraled out of control. I was struggling to find my place, caught between the cliques and social hierarchies that reorganize themselves every week like shifting sands. My best friend, Lily, was the one constant in my life, with her wild laughter and fierce loyalty. We bonded over our shared love for dark fantasy novels and late-night horror movie marathons, imagining worlds in which we could escape the cruel realities of high school. But as the pressures of social acceptance mounted, I found myself drawn to another crowd, the popular kids, whose easy confidence illustrated a kind of life I wanted to taste. They were magnetic, and I foolishly thought that if I could just fit in with them, all my insecurities would disappear. The turning point came one afternoon in a crowded cafeteria, right after Lily had confided in me about her struggle with depression. Instead of comforting her, I chose a different path. To gain favor with the popular girls, I can't quite recall their names now, only the memories of laughter mixed with biting judgment, I told them some private things about Lily, spun them into gossip that spread faster than I ever anticipated. In my mind, I justified my betrayal as a means of survival, a twisted version of friendship where I could climb the social ladder. For a fleeting moment, it worked. I was included in their conversations, invited to their parties, and even got a taste of that coveted high school popularity. But as the days turned into weeks, the guilt began to gnaw at the edges of my newfound confidence. Watching Lily withdraw into herself, I felt the weight of my betrayal like chains wrapping around my heart, pulling me deeper into despair. There were days when I thought about approaching her, trying to explain that I never intended to hurt her, but each time I opened my mouth to speak, the words died before they could escape. Instead, she slowly drifted away, finding solace with new friends who had no connection to me, the girl who had torn her down. The remorse that consumed me was relentless. Nights were spent tossing and turning, reliving that day in the cafeteria, watching her face crumple at the realization of my treachery. Now, in the present, I've grown into a person still marred by that impulsive decision. I get countless reminders of how I lost a friend who had been my anchor, someone who had trusted me with her deepest fears, and who I had betrayed in her most vulnerable moment. Each time I hear laughter echoing down the halls or see pictures of happy faces posting perfect memories, I feel her absence as sharply as the day she walked away. A few months ago, I attempted to reach out, crafting a simple apology via text, but all I received was silence. Maybe her new friends had filled that void I left, and maybe I deserved the void too. Yet, with each unanswered message, the past clings more tightly, like a dark cloud looming over my future. In a moment of desperation, I decided to visit our old haunts, our favorite cafe, the park bench where we spent countless afternoons discussing our dreams and fears, but it felt foreign without her laughter ringing in the air. Strangely enough, as I sat there staring at the now familiar view, I felt a sense of clarity. It dawned on me that while I could not change the past, the weight of that guilt could either crush me or serve as a reminder to be better. Life is messy, and though I lost someone irreplaceable, I could still choose to learn from my mistakes, to grow in ways that would honor her memory. So, I made a silent vow, to treat others with the kindness I had once betrayed, to be the confidant I had failed to be, and, in doing so, maybe one day I would find the courage to reach out to Lily once more, not as someone who had hurt her, but as someone who had learned to be a better friend. For those interested in how my journey unfolds, I'll keep updating. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll find a way to mend what was irrevocably broken, or at least, I hope to find solace in the company of new friends along the way. As the days turned into weeks, my silent vow became both my anchor and my weight. I often found myself wandering through the halls of my university, heart pounding at the possibility of coming across someone who might remind me of those ghostly echoes of my past, particularly Lily. The campus was a blend of laughter, vibrant conversations, and the promise of new beginnings, yet it felt like a tapestry woven from the threads of secrets and unspoken regrets for me. I would catch glimpses of groups of friends sharing moments that I had once deemed unimportant, quick jokes, supportive nudges, and those shared looks that seemed to resonate with a deeper understanding. My thoughts would drift back to that fateful day when my world split at the seams, when I chose to stand idly by as Lily bore the brunt of our peers' laughter, as they tore into her, like wolves feasting on carrion. I could still see the way those tears shimmered in her eyes, deep pools of sadness and betrayal, the moment she turned away from the crowd, seeking escape where there was none. It was a sight forever etched in my mind, a cruel reminder of my own cowardice. With every new interaction, I sought small ways to connect with others, to infuse kindness into simple gestures, whether that meant smiling at a stranger or offering a helping hand when I saw someone struggling. Each moment was a reminder that vulnerability is not a weakness but a bridge to stronger relationships. It was in one of these small interactions during a group project that I met Jenna, a girl with a contagious laugh and an uncanny ability to find joy even in the most mundane discussions. She had shared a story about her childhood dog, a scrappy little mutt who had managed to steal her heart. Listening to her animated recounting was a balm to my soul. I could feel something warming inside me that had long been dormant. As weeks wove new comfort between us, our friendship blossomed, slowly stitching up my jagged edges, but I still found myself haunted by my past. On evenings when the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky was awash with oranges and purples, I would often retreat to a quiet bench by the campus lake. I cherished those still moments, the way the water reflected the fading light, tranquil yet tumultuous, exactly how I felt of late. But it was during one of those evenings that a thought struck me like lightning. Perhaps I could reach out to Lily, not to recreate what we had, but to apologize without expectation, to show her that I had changed, that I was committed to growth. There it was, this flicker of hope. It felt almost reckless, but wasn't it just as reckless to hold on to fear? After a restless night, I typed out a message to her, hands trembling, heart racing, as I poured out everything I kept bottled up inside, the guilt, the pain, and the change within me. I hit send and immediately felt the weight of it dissipate into the air, my breath catching in my throat like a child learning to swim. Days slipped by, a mix of anxiety and anticipation weaving through me. Whenever my phone buzzed, I would jump, hoping it would be her name lighting up the screen. On more than one occasion, I braced myself to read the words that might either set me free or pull me back into the depths of regret. Instead, I found myself lost in a world of new friendships, a life burgeoning with possibilities. Jenna became my confidant, my cheerleader, as I shared the green shoots of hope sprouting from my decisions. Then, one serene afternoon, while lounging on the grass beneath the sprawling oak tree on campus, the familiar sound of that old notification echoed in my ears. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, heart throbbing like a drum, only to find a message from an unexpected source: Lily. The straightforward sentence stared back at me, stark and unadorned: "I've been thinking about what happened." It was the beginning of a long exchange, where we found ourselves discussing not just what had once transpired, but where we stood now, worlds apart yet yearning for connection. As we shared our journeys, I felt the jagged edges inside slowly smooth out. Lily had found her way through the labyrinth of pain, and in her newfound strength, she offered me a chance at redemption, not just for my sake, but for both of us. And that's when I realized that healing is not just an individual journey, it weaves itself through others' lives too, creating a vast tapestry of resilience and hope. As we forged a new beginning, I learned that true friendship often thrives not in the absence of mistakes but in our ability to acknowledge them, grow from them, and extend our hands toward one another, however shattered the past may be. I can only hope that this is just the start of a long journey of mending hearts, for both of us, complicated, messy, and beautifully raw, much like the most riveting stories worth telling. And as I find solace in this new chapter, I am reminded that even the deepest scars can blend into stronger foundations, and perhaps, in time, I'll be able to embrace the beautiful complexity of connection once again. I'll keep updating this little journey, weaving new stories alongside those that shaped me, and perhaps one day, it will all come full circle, offering a glimpse into a friendship reborn from the ashes of betrayal and regret. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself drifting into a routine that felt solid yet flexible, like the gentle currents of a river shaping the land around it. I immersed myself in volunteering at a local community center, a place bustling with laughter and warmth, where kindness was both given and received. This became my sanctuary, where stories were shared among strangers sprouting into friendships over the shared experiences of helping others. I would sit with the children, listening to their imaginative tales, allowing their innocence to remind me of the person I once was before my teenage years turned tumultuous. I carved out a space where I could connect without the weight of my past suffocating me, learning to celebrate both small victories and large defeats, forging a new identity step by step. And yet, Lily's shadow was never too far away. While I thrived on the newfound ability to empathize and support, I often thought of the moments we had shared, late-night whispers, secrets exchanged, the laughter echoing through the halls of our high school. I recalled the way our friendship felt so resilient then, until it crumbled under the weight of my choices. Each thought of her sparked a war within. Guilt and regret battled with the hope that maybe, one day, I'd find the strength to reach out. But I was haunted, too, haunted by shadows of the girl I had once betrayed, wondering if our connection could ever survive the wounds I'd inflicted. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering back and forth, battling the wave of fear that swelled with each passing day. One afternoon, while preparing art supplies for a mural project at the center, I overheard a couple of volunteers discussing a local high school reunion that was coming up. They talked about it in excited tones, reminiscing about old crushes and the infamous cafeteria food. An unexpected thrill coursed through me at the mention of school. The memories rushed back involuntarily: Lily's laughter, her teasing banter, the way she made even the dullest days shine. That familiar tug on my heart ignited a fire of longing I thought had dulled with time. Perhaps this reunion could be my opportunity to confront my past. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. It was a chance, an opening to reconcile, to show her that I had changed, that I was not the person who had hurt her. As I debated this within my mind, I resolved to attend, my heart pounding with the weight of what lay ahead. When the evening of the reunion finally arrived, I stood before the mirror, nervously adjusting my hair as if that would mask the turmoil bubbling under the surface. I chose a simple yet elegant dress, not wanting to draw too much attention, but inside I felt like a storm was brewing. I arrived early, clutching my phone with trembling hands, hoping that maybe I wouldn't run into her, perhaps I could just blend into the background. Yet, that was not my destiny. The room filled with familiar faces, laughter, and the comforting scent of nostalgia wafting through. It wasn't long before I spotted her across the room. Lily hadn't changed at all, her essence remained intact, as vibrant as the joking spirit I remembered. My heart raced, part of me wanting to flee, but another part anchoring me in place. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, concluding that there would be no healing without facing the wounds head on. As she caught my eye, it felt like time slowed, and memories flooded back, intoxicating me with the weight of our shared history. The room faded into a dull hum as I approached her, my heart a cacophony of beats echoing uncertainty. When she turned, our eyes locked, and in that moment, I couldn't decipher her expression: surprise, maybe even anger, but hidden within was a flicker of curiosity. I swallowed hard, words forming and collapsing in my throat like waves crashing against a rocky shore. "Hey, Lily," I started, my voice trembling ever so slightly. "It's been a long time." The silence stretched like a taut rope between us, filled with so many unspoken sentiments. Her smile faltered and faded, replaced by a cautious expression. "Yeah, it really has." The weight of what I had done lay between us like an uninvited guest, dimming the brightness of the occasion. I took a step closer, fueled by every ounce of regret I had harbored. "I'm really sorry for what happened. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our friendship and how I hurt you. I can't change the past, but I'm hoping maybe we can talk?" There was a long pause, and in that moment, I felt a mix of hope and despair wash over me. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I watched the emotions play across her face: confusion, pain, and perhaps flickers of understanding. "I don't know if talking will help," she replied softly, her voice a fragile thread woven with the weight of our shared history. "I understand," I said, clasping my hands in front of me, an unconscious gesture of vulnerability. "But I need you to know that I've changed. I know that my choices hurt you in ways I can't fix, but I want to do better. I want to learn to be the friend you deserved." With that, I felt a small shift, like the first glimmers of dawn breaking through a long, dark night. Slowly, her expression softened, revealing a hint of the warm-hearted girl I'd once shared secrets with. "Maybe we can try," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, igniting a spark of hope within me. For the rest of the evening, we spoke about our lives, our journeys, the lessons we had learned, and the shadows we still faced. What once felt like an insurmountable mountain to climb now unfolded as a path strewn with possibilities. As the night wore on, I realized that though we would never erase the past, we could take steps forward together, perhaps allowing our friendship to evolve and heal. By the time I left, it wasn't just a reunion I attended, it was a catharsis, a tangible step toward reconciliation. As I lay in bed that night, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I knew this journey wouldn't be easy. The scars of betrayal were etched deeply in both of us, and while time might not heal everything, I hoped it would, at the very least, allow us to stitch the pieces back together, each encounter strengthening the fragile threads of our renewed bond. I nestled under my covers, letting the warmth wash over me, and closed my eyes, dreaming of a friendship reborn, rekindled amidst the rich tapestry of our shared stories. As I drifted off, I remembered my silent vow, to treat others with kindness, to acknowledge my past mistakes, and to never lose sight of the power of connection, even when it felt far out of reach. It was a rainy Thursday evening when I found myself scrolling through old Reddit threads, nostalgia washing over me like the soothing sound of raindrops tapping against my window. The question that caught my attention was one that stirred up a melange of memories: what cheat code for a game is burned into your brain? As I paused to reconsider my response, I felt my heart quicken, not because I had a flashy code to share, but because I was reminded of a time when something as simple as a cheat code connected me to my late father in a way nothing else could. Growing up, my dad was a typical weekend warrior, always setting up the console for wrestling games or the latest action-packed adventure. He had no shortage of enthusiasm for gaming or for teaching me all the secrets that came with it. The thrill of winding my way through levels, taking down foes, and uncovering secrets was nothing compared to the laughter we shared over every successful cheat code. Like a rite of passage, he taught me the Konami code one weekend after we had spent the entire day glued to the screen, battling pixelated foes.
Up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start, he said with a smile, and I've never forgotten it.
Years passed, my father aging like a character who was gradually losing all of his lives, and I found myself buried in high school work and the whirlwind of teenage life, forgetting about those glorious weekends spent in front of the television. It wasn't until senior year that the reality of his terminal illness hit me like a sudden game over screen. Some days were good, others were not, and as his condition worsened, we watched his energy dissipate slowly, like a dying battery. On one particularly grim day, when sadness hung heavy in the air punctuated only by the hum of breathing machines, I knew I needed to touch base with my father, remind him of the lighter times. I sneakily set up an old console by his bedside and, in a moment of courage, I turned on the game we used to play together. The familiar theme music trickled into the sterile room, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw a glimmer in his eyes. I sat beside him and recited the Konami code as though it was a prayer. I remembered the joy in his voice when we would conquer a level together, and miraculously, with the nostalgia flooding in, I saw him smile. It was a bittersweet moment, but for a few minutes, he looked like the vibrant father I had known growing up, instead of the frail man his illness had turned him into. As I pressed the buttons on the old controller, we slowly shared stories from our past, reliving glories only we understood through the lens of our shared experiences. But as the weeks stretched on, my father's condition made this game time harder to hold on to. One night, I arrived home from school to find a voicemail from the hospital, and even before the message finished, I knew what it was. The tears fell silently as the void grew within me. In the days that followed, I spent countless nights replaying our old games alone, feeling a storm of emotions that I couldn't articulate. The laugh, the love, the brisk competition, they whirled and hummed within me like a comforting melody. Eventually, the console became too painful to look at, so I packed it away. I focused on life beyond video games, studies, friendships, and dreams, but I found myself returning to that thread. The question lingered in my mind, and I realized that maybe it was less about a cheat code for a game and more about the love that infused our time together. With the much anticipated college acceptances looming, I finally decided to face my feelings. Heart heavy, I dug out the old console one final time, and although it had gathered dust, it represented a fragment of my past.
Placing it back in the living room, I took a deep breath, and spoke aloud, up, down, left, right, B, A, start.
That night, I played until the sun began to rise, rediscovering pieces of myself I thought I had lost. I promised myself to cherish not just the game but the lessons surrounding it, the code forever embedding itself in my heart, a reminder of the connection I shared with my dad. Life isn't just about the games we play or the cheats we know, it's about the people who make those experiences meaningful. A few months later, the void still ached but my heart felt oddly light. I found myself on Reddit once again, only now I was more interested in sharing my story rather than simply reminiscing. I hesitated briefly, wondering if my experience was worthy of being shared. Yet, I clicked to start typing, hoping my reflection might resonate with others. After posting, I received a flood of messages, some filled with empathy, others with stories mirroring my own experiences. It was as if a community had wrapped around me, reminding me I was never alone, that the code I recited had a warmth that extended beyond mere pixels on a screen. Sometimes it takes heartache to rediscover joy, even amid the most difficult circumstances, and as those weeks turned into months, I began to heal. The familiarity of the thread would transform into lifelong connections. I realize now that while video games may hold codes, love and memory are the truest cheats, equipping us to rise above and carry on in remembrance of those we cherish. In the gentle embrace of those newfound relationships, I found solace in late-night chats that spilled into dawn, where the shared vulnerabilities of strangers morphed into the pillars of my resilience. Each message came like a cheat code, unlocking pieces of laughter and encouragement just when I thought I'd exhausted my will to get up. When my days felt colorless, I'd delve into the Discord server dedicated to our favorite game, where familiar usernames glowed in the dim light of my screen, like beacon signals in a fog. We spoke of our lives, the burdens we bore beyond the avatar skins and level-ups, and I learned that each of us bore scars, those remnants of heartache that reminded us of our humanity. One evening, as I sought refuge in the warm glow of my monitor, a fellow gamer named Jenna shared a card game she'd invented to cope with loss. Its mechanics were simple. Each participant would recite a memory linked to someone they missed, and with each memory shared, they would place down a card, creating a collective tapestry of longing and love. It was a healing exercise wrapped in fun, and I craved to participate, to share my pain and witness theirs. I soon learned that her unexpected vulnerability had a ripple effect. It opened doors to conversations I'd long avoided, opportunities to honor those I'd loved, and yes, even laugh at the quirky antics of my digital counterparts. That weekend, we held our first live game session over a video call, the virtual space overflowing with laughter as nostalgia washed over us like the tide pulling at a shoreline. With every story that was shared, there were gasps and bursts of laughter, the kind that dances at the edge of each syllable, transporting us back to simpler times. I could feel my heart uncoil a little, the heaviness of my grief loosening its grip, if only temporarily. I recalled a game where the protagonist could pause time, a code I'd entered too many times, where in that temporary stillness, I could gather my breath, reflect on the path taken, and, perhaps, reinvent myself anew for the journey ahead. Sharing memories with Jenna and the others felt akin to pressing that button, to freeze a moment while pain and joy collided, reshaping the landscape of my soul. Days turned into weeks, and I grew accustomed to their digital companionship, and though I had initially feared repetition would lead to dullness, I found the opposite to be true. New thoughts would spring forth, each more vivid and surprising, as we built a shared lexicon filled with inside jokes and heartfelt notes. Yet, amidst this warmth, I still felt pangs of the past creeping in uninvited, memories that snaked around my heart and mind, reminding me I would never entirely escape the shadows cast by those I'd lost. One evening, as I sat in my room, I received a direct message from Jenna, one that sent a tremble through me. "Can I call you? I need to share something." My instinct was to say no, to retreat into my well-practiced solitude, but she was my friend, and grief has a way of forcing connections when they feel most fragile. When we were connected by the thin thread of the call, I noticed her voice trembled lightly, unveiling the rawness beneath her steady exterior. "I want to let you know that I'm thinking of doing something for my brother's anniversary in a few months. I want to do a charity walk, and I plan to walk for him." My instincts diverted to protective mode, urging me to reassure her that it was wise to memorialize loved ones, but I held my tongue. "I want to invite you to join me," she continued hesitantly. "I know how much your brother meant to you." The weight of the moment settled into my chest, a bittersweet ache of longing rooted in an understanding that we shared, that what we lost could be the same, yet tasted differently depending on our flavors of love and grief. The thought of stepping into the sunlight, the cool wind against my face, made the walls of my room feel even more constricting. With my brother's absence weighing heavily in my mind, I felt a stirring of doubt. What if I failed? What if remembrance equaled pain? But as I searched for words that could explain the tug of war inside me, I realized I'd be honored. As the days turned to weeks leading up to the walk, I found myself caught in a bittersweet whirlwind, the kind that celebrates life while navigating the ache of loss. Each evening brought moments of introspection and shared laughter with Jenna. We grew closer, entwining our stories as we prepared to honor those we loved. The day of the walk arrived, bright and crisp, casting golden rays upon the gathering crowd. I wore a bracelet Jenna had made, a simple string of beads, colored in hues I knew would resonate with memories of my brother. Surrounded by fellow participants, strangers bonded by shared experiences of loss, I felt the power of collective remembrance, a supporting current that bolstered me through each step. We walked together, side by side, my heart fluttering with every stride taken in their company, infused with purpose, guided by love. As we neared the finish line, exhaustion weighed on my limbs, yet something extraordinary was happening inside me. I could feel laughter bubbling up, mixed with poignant reflection, the dichotomy of grief and joy intertwining as I shared stories of my brother with Jenna. With each story, I began to realize that while we may create cheat codes in games, the true cheat code for living is these connections wrought in love, forged through shared pain and triumph. We crossed the finish line together, breathless under the bright sun, and as I looked into Jenna's eyes, I felt an overwhelming gratitude flood my senses. We had turned heartbreak into a celebration, not forgetting but instead weaving them into the fabric of our lives. Reflections of the past and hopes for the future spun around us, knitting tighter the threads of memory and love. I realized then that life would move forward, like a game with new levels to explore, and I was no longer a player stricken with solo quests, but part of a larger community. Together, we would weave our memories into a legacy that was truly alive, embracing every triumph and trial that lay ahead. Months later, I would often replay those moments in my mind, feeling the warmth of joy spread through me like the golden glow of sunset. And with the echo of each keystroke and every meaningful chat in that online community, I kept the heart of my brother alive, buffering the pain of absence with a new code rooted deep in love and connection that I would carry forth, always. As I advanced through the new levels of life, I found myself eternally grateful for the unexpected friendships forged in that ripple of grief. It had a way of blurring lines between strangers, bringing together gaming enthusiasts from across the globe, each equipped with their own memories and codes burned into their hearts, just like mine. I still remember the first time I logged on after months of silence, heart racing as I entered the virtual realm. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and I hesitated, feeling the weight of nostalgia and anxiety press down on me. But then the notifications began to sprinkle in like fairy dust. Friends from the threads had sent me messages, their words wrapping around me like a warm embrace. There was Emma, always cheerful, with a quirky meme tailored just for me, Lucas, dropping in with a resource guide he had compiled on gaming strategies after our countless battles in online lobbies, urging me to rejoin the fight, and Sam, who had shared his own story of loss, letting me know that through our journeys together, we were crafting a safe space where pain could transform into understanding. I found myself drawn back into the world we had collectively built, a server like no other, pulsing with laughter and camaraderie, indefatigable against the melancholy shadows of life. As seasons shifted outside my window, the game morphed too, adding new expansions, characters, and quests that kept us engaged across time zones. It became our ritual. Every Friday night transformed into a digital gathering, where we checked in and supported one another through the tangible and intangible hardships life threw our way. We built not just a squad but a family, our mishaps and successes intertwining in a story that felt increasingly layered and profound. I was reminded of the way my brother had embraced every new game with unyielding optimism, and it felt fitting to mirror that spirit through every quest we embarked on, however mundane or extraordinary. I would often take a moment to step back during these sessions, filled with laughter and shared stories, and ponder how far we had come. Through late-night raids and accidental explosions, there was an unspoken promise amongst us, a commitment to carry one another, even when we felt our strongest suit was fraying. Then, one night, as the synthesized glow of our screens illuminated our faces, Lucas broke the stillness with a proposal that made my heart lift. "How about we host an online charity tournament?" he suggested, his voice crackling through the excited chaos of the chat. The idea sparked a flurry of messages, a mixture of enthusiasm and tentative worry. Were we ready for something so public, given our collective wounds? But slowly, the thrill of the thought washed over us. It felt like a power-up we never knew we needed. Our online adventures could help others, we could funnel our shared grief into hope and connection. As I watched the chat explode with chatter and heart emojis, I couldn't help but think it encapsulated everything we had bridged together over those months. We were not simply gamers on a screen, we were bearers of stories, transformed by the codes of resilience instead of defeat. Over the upcoming weeks, we organized the tournament, rallying other gaming communities, reaching out to charities, and brainstorming ways to make the most impact with our efforts. Each member of our group took on roles that suited their strengths, and what should have felt overwhelming transformed into an epic quest, each challenge met with newfound enthusiasm. As the tournament day arrived, I sat at my desk, surrounded by snacks and game controllers, with a sense of urgency tingling in the air. My heart raced not from nerves but from something else entirely. I felt my brother's spirit there with me, every cheer, every laughter echoing within the walls of my home. It was a connection that transcended distance, a network of caring souls gathered beneath the banner of love. When the tournament drew to a close, and winners were celebrated alongside heartfelt stories of those affected by the causes we fought for, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment wash over me. Though the virtual trophies were nice, what resonated deeper was the ripple effect we had created. We had helped others, drawing from our own wounds to craft a legacy filled with hope and healing. As the final moments unfolded with cheers through the voice chat, I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, attuned to the hum of laughter, the thrum of shared memories. Maybe it was in these last echoes that I found solace, in the awareness that without my brother's love, I might never have opened my heart wide enough to connect with these resilient souls who had become my lifeline. Amongst us, we shared not just codes, but the vulnerabilities and stories that transformed our gaming into something sacred. The night wound down, but the bonds we formed lingered like the melodic strains of an unforgettable soundtrack. Though the tournament may have ended, the journey continued, a radiant loop that intertwined love and connection, reminding us that in this expansive digital landscape, we could find not only the cheat codes to games but also the healing power hidden within our hearts. In quiet moments, I would recite that same code from my brother, knowing now it unlocked the largest treasure of all, a way to live courageously and effusively in his honor. Confession: high school stunt that I'll not forget even in afterlife. They say that the memories we make in high school stick with us, for better or worse, and believe me, my most significant memory is one I never intended to create. I was a quiet kid, the kind who blended into the background, never drawing attention to myself, and certainly never in the spotlight. My best friend, Jamie, on the other hand, was a natural entertainer, full of charisma and always craving excitement. It was early autumn, and the excitement in our yearly traditions was palpable: the homecoming game, the dance, and, of course, the infamous senior pranks. Jamie was convinced we needed to make a mark, and as usual, I got swept up in her enthusiasm, even though the thought made my stomach twist with dread. The idea was simple yet bold: we would sneak onto the roof of our high school and unfurl a massive banner that would read, "Happy Senior Year," in big, bright letters. It would be harmless, just a fun little surprise for everyone attending the pep rally later that week. The night before our planned heist, I lay in bed, the weight of my decision pressing against me. I pictured the banner, fluttering proudly in the wind, the laughter we'd share afterward. But the thought of getting caught gnawed at me. What if we did this and it backfired? I brushed aside my doubts, convincing myself that this was my chance to experience something radical, to break free of my quiet shell. When the day arrived, my stomach was a cacophony of nerves. We had plotted everything meticulously. Jamie had even snuck out supplies and a few ropes to help us climb, the thrill palpable in her eyes as we approached the darkened school. The familiar brick facade loomed in front of us, taking on an ominous hue under the moonlight. We made our way to the back, and with a boost from Jamie, I clambered up to the roof first, my heart racing with adrenaline and fear. Then it was Jamie's turn. As the wind whistled through the air, I realized how high we truly were, the ground beneath us seeming like a distant dream. We worked quickly, laughter punctuating our nervousness as we unrolled the banner, our hearts soaring with each looming moment. Just as we finished, however, the silence shattered. A sound echoed, a loud thump followed by frantic barking. I scanned the surroundings, heart pounding. A security guard. Was it bad luck or a twisted turn of fate? Before we could react, we instinctively ducked behind the rooftop's edge, peering over. My mind raced with panic. We need to go down. Now, I whispered frantically. But Jamie had a different idea. We can't leave it here. Just wait and see. She pulled a small flare from her backpack, the kind used for nighttime emergencies. This is our moment, she insisted, and with that, she lit it up, illuminating the darkness. All around us, the sudden brightness felt like an invitation. But I was frozen in place, heart racing. What are you doing, Jamie? I hissed, the breath stopping in my throat as sparks flew. Just then, the door swung open, and the guard emerged, flashlight sweeping the rooftop. Panic surged through me, a wave of dread washing over my decision. But all at once, Jamie turned the flare downward, pointing it like a beacon of trouble. Hey! Look at us! She called with an adrenaline-fueled laugh, as she waved frantically. The guard's beam of light snapped toward us, illuminating Jamie's silhouette, and in a split second, my heart plummeted. Are you crazy? I shouted, scrambling for the edge as the guard shouted for backup. In the ensuing chaos, Jamie dashed back toward the roof's entrance while I stumbled in confusion, frozen in disbelief at what she had just done. In a flurry of yelling and laughter, tension crackled in the air as Jamie shouted orders, trying to persuade me to join her in escaping toward the exit. But as I hesitated, my heart heavy with dread, I realized I could never go back from this moment. Jamie pushed me to run, and together we bolted toward the roof's ledge, adrenaline pumping through our veins. But just as we reached the door, everything felt surreal. A sharp crack echoed through the night, a piece of the roof crumbling beneath me. I grasped desperately for anything to steady myself, but the floor beneath my feet gave way, and in the chaos, I tumbled downward. My last sight was Jamie's desperate face mirroring my horror as I fell, hearing her scream get swallowed by the dark. There are no words to describe that fall, but I know I hit the ground hard, and darkness enveloped me. I thought I would simply wake up in the infirmary, but when I opened my eyes, I found myself floating above it all, watching as they carried my lifeless body away. Jamie was beside herself with guilt, and I could feel her overwhelming sorrow. But I couldn't blame her, I had willingly followed her, and there's a sick irony in this realization. It was meant to be a fun memory, a fleeting moment before adulthood, and I would have liked to believe that even my absence would have a touch of humor to it. But no, it was just pain and regret. I hovered above everything, the feelings around me pulsing like an echo, binding me to the earth yet freeing me to float as an observer, grasping to make sense of choices unmade and the paths we never took. Years passed in a blur, I watched my classmates graduate, my friends drift apart, and Jamie grow into adulthood haunted by that night. In the end, I was trapped in a moment I wished never happened, aware that no matter how far beyond life I transcended, I would carry this lesson within me, that the stunts we perform in the light of boyhood adventure can whip into dark echoes, shadows of regret that linger like ghosts even into whatever might come after. In a bittersweet way, I now confess that this high school stunt was a grave reminder of how moments can dazzle us with charm, only to unveil their tragic depth when we dare to capture them. As I linger in this ethereal space, watching the lives unfold below, I promise myself, next time, I won't just blend in. I'll be the voice that reminds others to tread carefully even through the laughter. We only get one path and only one chance at choosing it, and I wish I had known that more deeply when I was alive. Update, just a few months back, I overheard Jamie speaking with a friend at the cafe. She mentioned how she'd finally decided to share the story of that night at a memorial for me. I felt a bittersweet pang. My story didn't end there, I was still part of her world, still woven into the fabric of memories, and though it hurt, it felt warm too, like a lingering embrace from the beyond. In that moment, as I lingered in the shadows, my essence intertwined with the soft buzz of the cafe, I was struck by the thought of Jamie sharing that night's tale. It had been just over a year since I had slipped quietly from the world, leaving behind a mournful ripple that affected so many. At first, I hovered close to my old friends, invisible yet present, sensing their grief, their guilt over what they could have done differently. I felt the weight of their what-ifs and if-onlys wrap around me like a heavy blanket, smothering my spirit, yet deep down, I wanted to reassure them through the veil that it was okay. But that night at the cabin, the one I hoped they'd preserve as nothing but a joke among friends, was a swirling storm in the tapestry of my legacy. It started auspiciously, filled with the laughter and camaraderie of my senior year, all those youthful ambitions chatting together under the starry sky. We had gathered under the pretense of a harmless senior send-off, but unearthed in the dark of that gathering was reckless bravado. The plan seemed simple: impress everyone by swinging off the old bridge, the one that arched above the river, daring each other to take the leap with unspoken fears hiding behind our bravado. Jamie was one to rally the troops, her laughter a sweet bell that beckoned us to the challenge. I had always thought I was invincible, a fervent 30-second glimpse of fame that would forge bonds and memories. But that moment, with the cool water glistening below, I hesitated. The whispers of apprehension gripped me, my heart raced at the thought of the fall, its weight anchoring my spirit. Jamie, sensing my hesitation, had urged me on, flashing that confident smile of hers that melted my resolve like butter on toast. In my soul, I wished I had turned back, but instead, I took my leap of faith. As the air rushed around me, every uncertainty fell away in those blissful seconds of weightlessness, only to be followed by a horrifying crash when I met the surface of the river. The cold shocked my system, and pain surged through me like wildfire when I struck the bottom. I didn't realize the severity of my injury until I surfaced, gasping for air, my body heavy, my vision blurring with spots. Friends screamed my name against the chorus of splashing water, confusion woven into their voices. Help! Somebody call 911. Jamie's screams punctured the cacophony of chaos, but it already felt too late. The water swallowed my vision, tangled me in its depths, and as consciousness ebbed, I sensed the frantic worry in her heart alongside my own fading. I lay in silence, reflecting on the futile nature of our bravado, the fears we brushed aside in the face of friendship, only to unwittingly draft our destinies with strokes of recklessness. I had hoped to have more time, to bridge the gap that stretched between our youth and our potential. As months passed in between dimensions, my presence loomed as a bittersweet memory for my friends. Jamie's eventual decision to share the story made me feel like a whisper of an echoed promise, a reminder that life, in its fragility, demanded we chose our stunts wisely. I could see her sitting at the memorial with tearful eyes, speaking to a cluster of friends whose lives I had touched. My heart swelled with an imperfect sense of pride. I was no longer just a student remembered for my final act of folly, but a beacon urging those still living to treasure their paths, to heed the whispers in the silence as they chose how to leap into love, life, and courage. Listening to Jamie recount the laughter, the camaraderie, the mistakes we made, and the lessons learned, I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her I was grateful for the parts she preserved, for every moment stitched together with laughter. In that space, I found a sense of peace, knowing that even in this other existence, I could still connect with them through memories, stories, and love. The afterlife had taught me that the simplest moments lived deeply could resonate far beyond the limits of our years, continuing to pulse within their hearts like an eternal flame, reminding them to embrace each step of their journey, lest they find themselves leaping without purpose. As I drifted in this realm of whispers and glimpses, the warmth of those emotions enveloped me, comforting yet tinged with a haunting sadness. I often found myself revisiting that night, the laughter mingling with the taste of regret, like a bittersweet lemon slice on the tongue. At the memorial, I imagined Jamie standing in front of their gathered friends, her voice a gentle tremor as she recounted the tale of our fateful adventure. Her face would light up, reflecting the humor we shared, yet behind her laughter, I sensed the unmistakable shadow of loss, a reminder that while joy could fill the air, it was tempered by the absence of my physical presence. In this ethereal space, I understood the weight of her words, how the memories we create can illuminate even the darkest corners of grief. I wished I could manifest beside her, to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder, to give her a nod of encouragement, to tell her that sharing our story could perhaps lighten her own burden. But I reminded myself that this was not about closure for me, it was about liberation for her, a chance to reclaim our narrative, to pull beauty from the wreckage of that chaotic night. As days passed in the afterlife, a sense of harmony settled within me, A gentle balance that allowed memories to flow without judgment. My existence had shifted from one of fleeting moments to a timeless presence in the stories of others. I began to see Jamie through a different lens. She embodied resilience, a true testament to the strength that lies beneath vulnerability. I reveled in her laughter, wishing I could shower her with affirmations of the adventures we shared, the spontaneous road trips with the music cranked up, the endless nights of sharing dreams under a canopy of stars. What struck me most was how these memories didn't merely cling to Jamie, they expanded, intertwining with the lives of all those who loved me. Friends altered their paths, they hugged a little longer, held on to moments a bit tighter. Even in their trials, I could sense laughter bubbling close to the surface, reminding me that I hadn't vanished but merely transformed, becoming a part of every shared smile and tear among them. I felt their journeys unfurling, and I was a silent witness, a ghostly cheerleader, rooting them on from the shadows. Time flowed differently here, moments from my life melded with theirs, creating a beautiful tapestry rich with color and texture, vibrant with experiences lived fully, reminders that life was meant to be savored. The night of the memorial arrived, and I floated near the edge of their gathering, sensing the mingling energies around me. As Jamie took her place at the front, the room hushed, enveloped in an air thick with anticipation and emotion. She shuffled her notes, but her gaze wandered, and in that momentary pause, I felt the ripple of connection we shared. When she began to speak, her voice cracked. It wasn't just about me, it was about us, about how each laughter-filled moment had woven our lives closer. She recounted our grand plans to take over the world, our ridiculous stunts, and how we dared each other constantly to push boundaries, capturing the essence of our friendship. As her story unfolded, I could see my friends nodding, laughter breaking like gentle waves against the shore. I wished I could shout, to fill the room with the joy I felt, to tell them that their happiness was safe with me now, that I would forever cherish those memories. As she reached the climax of the night, speaking about the final act of rebellion that had brought me here, it was not guilt that washed over me, but an overwhelming sense of love. She forgave me, in front of everyone, for the consequences of that fateful moment. I felt a warmth flood through me, something new, a recognition of the beauty that can arise from chaos. In that moment, I knew we were more than the sum of our experiences, we were a constellation of moments shining bright with vulnerability, laughter, and growth. It struck me suddenly, how our lives, entwined by joy and despair, continued to push forward, an unbreakable bond nestled within the fabric of time. As the night unfolded with stories shared, tears shed, and laughter that echoed into the depths, I floated above it all, watching as Jamie found moments for herself, crafting new memories that would swell with life, allowing her spirit to soar once more. In my ethereal essence, I vowed to always be there when she needed a whisper of reassurance, to nudge her in the right direction when she hesitated. The afterlife had taught me that while I might not walk beside her physically, the connection we forged would pulse through every thought and interaction, transcending beyond existence itself. And as the night drew to a close, I felt a strange exhilaration wash over me. Perhaps this was the end of my story, but it was not an ending filled with sorrow or regret. Rather, it was a gentle beginning, and I would forever be a part of her story, living on in laughter, memories, and a legacy of love that neither time nor space could sever. I think back to that summer evening when I unknowingly embarked on a journey into the unsettling depths of my childhood fears, a simple choice, really, just me and my family, scrolling through channels, looking for something to watch together. My parents were always keen on introducing us to classic films, and that night, my older brother suggested we watch The Wizard of Oz. Little did I know, this beloved tale, often regarded as whimsical, would spiral into something that left a haunting impression on my young heart. As the opening credits rolled and the sun blazed lazily through the living room window, I felt a warm glow of nostalgia, lulled into a false sense of safety with my family gathered close. It all began innocently enough, daring Dorothy, yellow brick roads, and fierce flying monkeys, symbols of adventure and fantasy. However, the tone shifted as the ominous nature of the Wicked Witch of the West began to unfold. For a child with a vivid imagination, her cackling laughter and shrill voice sent shivers racing down my spine. I remember trying to hide behind the couch cushions, seeking refuge while my brother laughed at my fear, a typical sibling moment that felt both comforting and isolating. There was one scene in particular that shattered that safety net, when Dorothy's loyal dog, Toto, is taken away. At that moment, I could feel my heart tighten, and my young mind couldn't comprehend why anyone would hurt an innocent creature. It felt unjust, cruel even, and the weight of that was a heavy cloak around my shoulders, constricting my breath. I begged to turn it off, yet my parents insisted it was all a part of the story. I gripped the cushion tighter, tears threatening to spill over as I tried to rationalize their words, thinking perhaps it was just a benign part of the plot. But as the story continued to unfold, the witch's relentless chase and the grave threats to Dorothy's safety felt too real, too close, especially as I grasped the idea that fantasy could meld into fear. My family's laughter echoed around me as they cheered for Dorothy's resilience, yet I found myself paralyzed, lost in the maze of my own anxiety and concern for what came next. I spent sleepless nights thereafter, plagued by terrible dreams of green skin and cackling laughter, the images overlaid with shadows dancing menacingly in the corners of my vision. It became a ritual of sorts. I would watch my brother flick through channels, avoiding anything that might threaten to elicit that familiar dread. Over time, I learned to mask these fears, tucking them away into the recesses of my mind, where they lay dormant, only resurfacing occasionally to remind me of that feeling of vulnerability. Years passed, and I grew into a teenager, slowly distancing myself from the notion that one silly movie could leave an indelible mark on my psyche. But then, while scrolling through the threads of Reddit one city night, I stumbled upon a post titled "What movie trauma did you experience at a young age?" A simple phrase drawing forth reminiscences from strangers across the globe. I felt an undeniable urge to comment, sharing the story I had tucked away for so long. Reading through others' experiences illuminated my feelings, normalizing my fears and pain, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in being affected by something designed for children, a reminder that imagination can warp innocence into something darker. My comment led to a series of wonderful conversations, unexpected connections, and catharsis through shared vulnerabilities. As simple as it was, it felt like shedding layers of unnecessary shame, exploring how fear is a shared human experience, regardless of the context it manifests within. As I reflect on those dark childhood nights, I understand how I've woven that trauma into my broader story, how it taught me empathy and compassion towards others coping with their own fears. Today, I venture to revisit The Wizard of Oz, not with trepidation but with an understanding of how one innocuous decision can ripple through time, leaving traces of emotion laden with lessons learned and bonds formed. As I close the laptop and prepare for sleep, I feel a sense of lightness, knowing that my experience, once heavy on my heart, has transformed into a shared moment of humanity, something both tragic and beautiful, and perhaps, one that will weave its way into my ongoing narrative, my own tale combining fear, strength, and the magic of connection. As I lay in bed, the familiar melody of Over the Rainbow began to play in my mind, conjuring up images of a young girl swept away on a fantastical journey, one that mirrored my own in so many unintended ways. When I was 5, my father had taken me to see a local theater production of The Wizard of Oz, the kind where the actors were dressed in colorful costumes and the set resembled a quirky interpretation of the Yellow Brick Road. I remember clinging to his arm, mesmerized by the vibrant colors and the infectious energy of the crowd who sang along with each lyric. Yet, as the story unfolded, the looming shadows of the Wicked Witch and the anxiety of Dorothy's journey began to settle in the pit of my stomach. Even at that age, I sensed the weight of their struggles, an endless pursuit for belonging and courage, which felt achingly real. It wasn't until the climax, when the witch's cackling filled the theater and when her minions emerged, crawling through the mist, that my enchanted world shattered. I didn't just see a performance, I felt it. My young heart raced, blending confusion with fear, as I realized this would still end the same way for Dorothy. Even after confronting the darkness, she still had to return home. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep evaded me, and those feelings twisted and turned, a reflection of my inner child trying to decipher the horrors of the world. For years afterward, the sound of cackling disturbed my dreams, and shadows that flickered against my bedroom wall might as well have been flying monkeys come to take me away. My father, unaware of the trauma locked within my memories, would recount our outing fondly, insisting I'd loved every moment, his voice tinged with nostalgia, reinforcing a dichotomy I found difficult to navigate. In an effort to dissect this complicated fear, I spent years pretending I wasn't afraid, burying the truth beneath layers of bravado. My teenage years became an exercise in avoidance. I dodged conversations about the film even when it was referenced in casual banter, evading it until it faded into the background of my life. This avoidance seemed sufficient until I reached adulthood, where I began to realize how much I'd let that innocent childhood fear shape my decisions, how I shied away from challenging tasks, how I struggled with trusting others, and how I still occasionally flinched at laughter that boomed too loudly, as if it echoed the witch's echo. But now, years later, as I sat with my laptop, contemplating the lessons woven into that childhood trauma, I had decided to embrace the film once more, hoping it would do for me what it had initially failed to do: heal. As I hit play, the familiar scenery unfolded, the anticipation and anxiety mingling in my chest. I found myself smiling at the absurdity of the events while simultaneously crying during the tender moments of friendship and bravery. Each song evoked a new wave of understanding, buoying me through nostalgia but also catharsis. I sat there long into the night, lost within the confines of my memories, letting go of fear while grasping the significance of those friendships that carried Dorothy through her treacherous path. The journey became less about the foreshadowed terror and more about the beauty of resilience, of courage found in the most daunting of circumstances. As the credits rolled, a warmth enveloped me, which I can only describe as a reconnection with my younger self, as if I had held her hand on that winding road once again. It was a small yet profound moment of realization, that despite the fears that had once governed my life, I had navigated my way through dark times, just as Dorothy had. In looking back, I felt a sense of gratitude, recognizing that these experiences have shaped my narrative, each scar and twist adding depth to my existence. I turned off the laptop, content with the story I had retold, feeling lighter as I slowly drifted off to sleep, knowing the journey was ever evolving, and each chapter held a piece of magic, however unusual it might seem. And so, this post may not end with a neatly tied bow of resolution, but instead, invite curiosity about the ever-unraveling adventure of life, where fears can morph into lessons, and trauma can become an authentic part of one's journey, threading us into the tapestry of collective stories we all share. As people sometimes say, it's only when we confront our fears that we discover the beauty hidden within our realities, a truth that is fundamentally human. If I learned anything that evening, it was that the wizard, often perceived as a chilling specter, was perhaps just another flawed individual struggling to find his own way home, and maybe that reflection revealed the most profound lesson of all: we are not so different after all. The next few days unfolded with a sense of lightness I hadn't anticipated. The heaviness that clung to my heart had almost completely dissipated. I looked forward to walking through my neighborhood with whispers of laughter from children playing in the park mixing with the gentle rustle of leaves, the world taking on a new vibrancy. I began to see familiar faces in a different light, particularly my grandmother, who had introduced me to the film all those years ago. A woman of profound wisdom and gentle strength, she had often shared stories of her own childhood fears, how she once hid beneath her bed at night, convinced that shadows danced maliciously along her walls. I thought back to the countless afternoons spent together, sipping tea and sharing dreams, moments when I was just a kid who believed in everything and nothing at once. One evening, determined to reconnect, I invited her over for dinner. I decided to include some of her favorite dishes, cottage pie and apple pie, the ones that always made her reminisce about her youth. As the aroma of baked apples wafted through my house, I felt a rush of gratitude for the bond we shared. When she arrived, there was a familiar warmth in her smile that instantly put me at ease. After dinner, as we settled into the cozy living room with mismatched throw pillows, I brought up the old film. "Remember how you showed me The Wizard of Oz?" I asked, half hoping she'd recall the same unsettling reactions we shared. Her eyes twinkled with sarcasm as she mused, "Did I traumatize you?" I laughed, but then fell quiet, reflecting on the way Dorothy's journey had unfolded both on the screen and within my life. "You know," I said, "I've realized the wizard is just a man lost in his own way, much like we all are. It's like confronting our own flaws." My grandmother listened intently, her face softening as she considered my words. "I suppose we all wear masks, can't find our way to the truth," she finally replied, her voice quiet yet resolute. With our conversation flowing naturally, it transformed into an exploration of her own childhood fears, how the adults in her life often spoke in hushed tones about the war, about loss, about the unknowns of their realities. It amazed me how we both had been shaped by a common grief, an inherited trauma that intertwined through generations. As the evening faded into night, soft laughter and shared stories draped over us like a warm blanket. I felt something profound happen, a shift. Where fear had previously planted seeds of oppression, a garden of understanding began to sprout, filled with vibrant colors of empathy and connection. It occurred to me that confronting my childhood fears had not only allowed me to heal but had given me a compass to navigate the emotional landscapes of those I loved. I began to see the tapestry of shared experiences as something not to shy away from but to embrace. The next day, I made an impromptu trip to the local library, feeling the urge to uncover more stories. I wandered through aisles of books, breathing in the musty scent of history and adventure. I stumbled upon a collection of short stories about fear and courage, flipping through pages until one caught my eye, an anthology containing tales from various authors recounting their childhood phobias and how those experiences shaped their adult lives. As I read, I realize the profound connections we weave are embedded not only in shared conversations but also in the scattered narratives waiting silently on library shelves. Each story felt like a breadcrumb leading back to the original theme I had uncovered with my grandmother: how vulnerability shapes us all into who we become. With each turn of the page, I felt a part of something larger, a communal bond with every reader who ever picked up that anthology, shared their own tales of terror and triumph. As I reflected, I saw the power of narrative, of connection, life's tragedy and beauty intertwined seamlessly. I came home that evening with an armful of books, excited to delve deeper into these human experiences. You see, revisiting The Wizard of Oz didn't just dim the shadows of my past fears, it illuminated my present journey toward healing and understanding. In those vulnerable moments, we lay bare our common threads, stitching together the intricate tapestry of our lives with sincere honesty, transforming fears from burdens into bridges. As I nestled down under the covers that night, with the comforting weight of novels beside me, I knew this journey wasn't about erasing pain but rather accepting it as a part of my canvas, a brushstroke of experience that made me uniquely me. And perhaps, that was the real magic I had been searching for all along. Update: I wrote and shared these reflections in an online community, expecting a handful of comments but instead found discussions blossoming around the shared experiences of growing up watching films that left long-lasting impressions. It became a safe space for storytelling, where people echoed my sentiments about fear, trauma, and growth. The most heartwarming part came when my grandmother joined the thread, sharing her own stories of loss and resilience, leading to a heartfelt connection with others in the comments. Through my act of vulnerability, the lens through which I viewed my grandmother shifted too, reminding me that our stories don't just shape us, they can open doors to others, bridging gaps we never knew were there. And in this digital age, we often find ourselves in the same vast, connected tapestry, richer for daring to share our truths. When I sat down in front of my old gaming console that chilly autumn evening, I had no idea that one single quote would lead to a revelation that would change my understanding of friendship forever. I had grown up with gaming as my escape, a comforting ritual from childhood through adulthood. My friends and I had spent countless hours immersed in vast digital worlds, triumphing over impossible odds and sharing laughter filled with our most ridiculous inside jokes. So, when Stephen, my longtime friend, threw out a seemingly random quote during our regular gaming night, something he thought was trivial, a moment of nostalgia, I couldn't help but wonder if I was missing something deeper. We were playing an unnamed game that had become shorthand for our teenage summers, a classic that had shaped our bond. As the main character faced yet another absurd situation, Stephen casually said, "I don't even have to be in the same room to know you're laughing." It struck me hard. How many times had I felt the same way about him, knowing that laughter was a bond stronger than physical presence, particularly when it often felt like our lives were drifting apart in the monotony of adulthood. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake off that quote, replaying it in my mind like a soundtrack of nostalgia. Each time I picked up my controller, the laughter echoed, but beneath it lay a nameless anxiety. I sensed a rift growing between us, meetings became sporadic, and conversations dwindled to small talk that barely scratched the surface of our once vibrant friendship. I couldn't pinpoint why it hurt so much, perhaps it was the unspoken tension of unfulfilled plans or the means of living different lives, as families and careers began to take precedence over our escapades. One night, while the pixels danced on screen and the soundtrack wove between our nostalgic banter, I hesitantly asked Stephen if he felt it too. Silence enveloped the atmosphere like a heavy fog, and for a moment, I feared I had crossed an unseen boundary. Finally, he sighed, the weight of 1,000 unwritten words hanging in the air. He admitted he felt disconnected, as if we were two players in a multiplayer game who had unwittingly wandered off into different maps. It was his honesty that instigated the wave of vulnerability washing over me, and suddenly, my emotions spilled out, my worry about us, my guilt over lost time, how I missed the casual hangouts that felt effortless back in college. It was an odd thing, to expose your feelings like this, especially when you're wired to keep the game face on, but it felt liberating. We spent the next few hours talking, reminiscing about shared experiences, those late-night campaigns and epic wins that felt like they could last forever. Laughter bubbled up freely in between our confessions, as the weight of underlying tension began to lift. There, in that dimly lit room filled with the faint glow of the screen and the comforting scent of takeout, we decided to reignite that lost spirit. We made a pact to carve out time each month to really dedicate ourselves to gaming together again, not just as a means of entertainment, but but as a canvas to reconnect with one another. In those moments, I felt a warmth wrapping around our friendship, a reminder that sometimes a single quote can unpack layers hidden during bustling lives and responsibilities. Weeks turned into months, and though our gaming nights were sometimes fraught with the chaos of life, work and personal issues testing our resolve to reconnect, we held on to that promise. As I sit here, reflecting on how that small, seemingly innocuous moment spiraled into a deeper understanding of what it means to truly nurture a friendship, I realize that sometimes you just need a little spark, a whisper of nostalgia to shake things loose. Today, the gaming marathons aren't just about the achievements anymore, they serve as our therapy sessions, allowing us to unload, laugh, and share in the absurdity of our adult lives. It dawned on me that the love and support carried through friendships can be as fulfilling and reinventable as the fantastical realms we escape into. A week later, as if to close the chapter on this rediscovered saga, Steven sent me an update, a meme that perfectly encapsulated that feeling of gaming together, reminding me of our inside jokes. Attached was a caption, "You may not be in the same room, but your laughter always fills the void." It was more than humorous, it felt reassuring, a touch of light in life's more serious moments. I found myself smiling, knowing that through the world of games and vulnerability, we had unconditionally connected again, evolving our friendship into something richer, all because of one small but impactful quote. As the days turned into weeks following Steven's meme, the surreal blend of nostalgia and newfound connection lingered in the air like a comforting fog. I would often find myself scrolling through our past chats, reliving those countless nights spent unlocking achievements together, each message a flashback to laughter echoing through our headsets while gaming deep into the night. Life had shifted dramatically since we'd drifted apart, more responsibilities, heavier workloads, life wrapped in its unpredictable chaos, but that little meme seemed to have opened a door back to a place of joy that I thought had been locked forever. One afternoon, I decided to reach out, wanting to explore this revitalized friendship rather than letting it dwindle into another series of missed opportunities. "Hey, want to team up this weekend? I hear they've got a new event going on," I typed, my finger hovering over the send button, a nervous twinge in my stomach. After what felt like an eternity, my phone chimed with a response, "Absolutely. Let's wreck some noobs." The ease of his words washed over me, soothing my anxiety like a balm. As Saturday approached, I prepped my setup, rearranging my desk and ensuring my headset was charged, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. We met in the virtual arena, our avatars clashing against each other in a fervor that felt strangely liberating. Each victory brought shouts of triumph, each defeat was swiftly turned into a shared joke, and soon, the initial awkwardness melted away like ice under the warmth of the spring sun. The laughter rolled easily, punctuated by quick witticisms that felt completely organic and familiar, and I realized that I had missed him. Between rounds, we chatted about life, drifting from stories of our routines to hilarious anecdotes from the trenches of adulthood. It felt like time had folded back on itself, erasing the distance built by years of silence. Yet, I could still feel the ghost of that unspoken tension lingering, the memories of both good times and regrets hovering in the backdrop, waiting for a moment of acknowledgement. One of our victories led us into an unexpectedly emotional conversation, sparked by a seemingly benign comment about how difficult it is to find genuine friendships as adults. "It's crazy how when we were kids, all it took was showing up at the park to make friends," I said, my voice quieter in the sea of digital banter. His character paused, a rare moment of silence stretching between us as he processed the words. "Yeah, it's like we forget how to reach out," he replied gently, and the sincerity of it struck me like a chord plucked in an empty room. The sentiment hung there, an invisible thread connecting our experiences of loneliness and longing, the struggle of feeling like you're drifting in the currents of life away from those who matter most. That was when I took a deep breath and decided to bare a little of my soul. "You know, after everything, I always thought I messed things up between us. I got caught up in my life and let it take over," I confessed, the words spilling out with a mix of vulnerability and hope. I wish things had stayed the same." I held my breath, waiting for him to respond, silence amplifying my fears. "I felt it too," he finally said, deep and thoughtful. "Life threw us off our game, but I realize it's never too late for a respawn." I chuckled softly, relief settling in my chest. We spoke more about our drifts apart, the choices that had led us to this moment, and as we did, I could almost feel the shadows of regret ebbing away, replaced by the dawning warmth of understanding. We gradually crafted what felt like a new foundation for something brighter, a mix of past and present that was uniquely ours. Hours melted away into a pleasant blur, and when we finally signed off, the air was heavy with a contentment I hadn't felt in years. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling that elusive ache of nostalgia not as a sad reminder but as a comforting call to arms. Our friendship was evolving, not just from a single quote but from an entire narrative of recovery, laughter, and connection rebuilt. I couldn't help but wonder where this journey would take us next, embracing the uncertainty with hopes for shared gaming nights, inside jokes, and the sweet bond that comes from facing both the virtual and real worlds together. Without a doubt, we had found the portal back to each other, and I was eager to discover what adventures awaited us beyond the screen. A week later, I received another message from Steven. "Hey, I just found a bunch of old clips of us playing. Let's make a highlight reel of our epic moments." I couldn't help but laugh. Through all the chaos, he was still the same guy who loved to make memories. "Count me in," I replied, feeling that familiar thrill of excitement. As I settled down to sleep that night, the gentle buzz of anticipation swirled through my mind like the sound of levels being completed, and I realized sometimes it takes a simple meme to reignite not just friendships, but a journey of rediscovery. The next morning, I could hardly contain my excitement as the thought of revisiting those old gaming memories danced in my mind. When night fell, and the rest of the world drifted into its slumber, I found myself in an all too familiar spot, nestled in my comfortable chair, a soft blanket draped across my legs, and the glow of my computer screen illuminating the room. I opened the chat thread with Steven and felt a surge of nostalgia as I scrolled through our past conversations, a digital scrapbook of laughter and togetherness. Memories flooded back, those long nights spent battling virtual foes, the passionate debates over strategy, and the gleeful moments when we pulled off some ridiculous play against all odds. Our gaming sessions had become not just about achieving victories but about bonding, about being there for each other in a way life often made challenging. We were two college kids trying to navigate the intricacies of adulthood, and gaming became our sanctuary. The memory of Steven's infectious laughter echoes in my mind like a cherished tune. It reminded me of how, beneath the surface of our playful banter, we had shared vulnerabilities about our futures, our fears, and often our loneliness. "Okay, so what clips do you want me to start with?" I typed eagerly, and moments later, Steven sent a slew of hilarious highlight snippets, reminding me of our best moments, the time we had surprisingly defeated a notoriously tough boss after countless tries, his triumphant scream followed by an eruption of laughter, and the image of my character tumbling off a cliff yet again because my fingers weren't keeping up with his over-the-top strategies. As I began piecing them together, I could feel the exhilaration building, a project sparked by shared history rather than just pixels and gameplay. It was as if every clip reanimated the emotions we'd packed into those virtual worlds. I sat back, reveling in our camaraderie, acknowledging how these memories had woven themselves tightly into the fabric of our friendship. Once the compilation started to take shape, I felt a surge of pride, a creation born from our journey. "You've got to see this when it's done," I told him, and he responded with an enthusiastic emoji-laden message expressing how much he was looking forward to reliving those moments. We quickly set a date for the unveiling, and I could hardly sleep that night, my mind replaying each clip as I envisioned our reactions. The day of the highlight reel reveal arrived, and I felt a familiar thrill as I joined our call. Steven's face lit up when he saw the title on the screen, "Epic Adventures, The Best of Us." I pressed play, and the sounds of our younger selves filled the air, laughter mixing with the background music I had chosen to accompany our exploits. We found ourselves lost in the same essence as before, those moments that felt so expansive, so freaking monumental in our lives. We were so bad. Steven howled as a clip had us both running in circles, completely oblivious to the task at hand. I replied lightheartedly, "No, we were just misunderstood geniuses." It was a simpler way to describe how we had stumbled through everything with unwavering determination. As the reel reached its climax with a montage of our best moments, I looked over at Steven, his excitement palpable. "Look at us," he said, grinning from ear to ear, "I missed this." Those words settled deeply within me, resonating with an unspoken truth I often felt but could never articulate. Our laughter lingered long after the video ended, and soon enough, we found ourselves diving into conversations that felt deeper, more emotional, sharing what we were currently facing in life, the challenges and uncertainties, the struggle between dreaming big and the weight of reality. It was in those conversations that I felt us shift from just friends into a true support system, the kind forged through years filled with shared laughter and tears, victories in games leading to victories in life. As the night dwindled, we promised to continue our collaborations and reconnect with the joy of not only gaming together but sharing our journeys. I felt a reconnection echoing in my heart, reaffirming that while life would always take us through different paths, some bonds would always guide us back home, illuminating the way in moments when we feel most lost. And as I crawled into bed, thoughts tinged with excitement and gratitude, I realized that sometimes it takes a journey through outlandish adventures in a virtual world to find your way back to a cherished friendship, reminding you that laughter truly fills the void. Weeks passed, and with every video call, every recorded session, and every shared meme, the bond between Stephen and I only strengthened. It was as if we were weaving a new tapestry from the old threads of our friendship, occasionally laughing about how ridiculous it felt to navigate this adult life together, holding on tightly to our shared love of gaming, a love that had effortlessly bridged the gap time and distance had created. The thrill of recounting our digital quests inevitably led us into discussions about our personal quests too, the stories evolving into sincere conversations about our hopes, dreams, aspirations, and often, what we feared losing along the way. Then, just as life can often take an unexpected turn, I received a message that made my heart drop. It was from Stephen, but this time it was different. It was an apology, tinged with grief. His father had fallen ill rather quickly, and the family was facing uncertain times. My heart sank. I had seen what health struggles could do, the emotional toll it bore on both the individual and their closest people. I felt a sense of helplessness wash over me, but I knew that sometimes, the greatest support one can offer is simply being there. I messaged him back, "I'm here for you, Steve. Whatever you need, I'm just a call away." That message felt insufficient but was the lingering echo of our camaraderie from years past. I knew just offering my presence would mean something, even if I couldn't wave a magic wand to fix it all. As the days rolled on, Stephen went quiet, and doubt tugged at me, wondering if I was really being supportive from far away. In moments of confusion, I started remembering those chaotic gaming nights filled with joy, humor, and companionship. I realized that perhaps the very essence of our bond was precisely what he needed, fundamentally rooted in just being present. Eventually, I received a brief message, "I'm okay for now, just finding my way through." Knowing he'd reached out gave me a spark of hope. I decided to take the initiative and scheduled a gaming night. I sent him an invite to play our favorite game once again. "We can't let ancient heroics fade, your laughter is the quest I need to complete," I texted jokingly. He accepted. That night felt familiar, and despite the dark cloud hovering above any concerns about health, we embarked on our digital adventure. As we slid back into our groove, the playful banter returned, notes of laughter mingling once more as we battled side by side, perhaps proving that laughter is more than just a response, it can heal and provide strength in moments of uncertainty. And at the end of the evening, as we faced our virtual enemies, I felt something I hadn't in a while. Despite the world outside being tumultuous, within that pixelated universe, we built something special again, re-establishing that vital connection. It was calming and a reminder that amid life's unpredictable seasons, friendships forged in laughter can often become a lifeline in the darkest times. A few weeks later, before another session, Stephen reached out saying he felt grateful for that small reprieve we'd gifted each other, claiming how that night had surprisingly helped him cope with everything happening around him. "It's strange," he confessed, "how just revisiting old memories can remind you of who you are." I couldn't agree more. Our lives had intertwined so beautifully that these gaming moments, once a form of distraction, had become a surface to resource each other, strengthening our resilience. This was no longer just about a game or mere laughter, it was a tapestry woven with care, memories, support, and love, reminding us that no matter where life tried to lead us, we'd always find our way back to one another, bridging any gap, laughing together in those chaotic yet magical virtual worlds. And eventually, I knew we'd create new memories, just like that one fateful meme, ushering in new laughter and connection. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt assured that with every laugh, every heroic quest, our enduring friendship was its own beautiful victory.